Chapter 44. The Death Eater's Survival on a Deserted Island. The magnificent and hallowed Dark Lord will require 37 weeks to restore his heartbeat, 100 days to awaken fully, 10 days to regain his strength, and just 1 day to reclaim the world. Under a starless sky, the Death Eaters knelt around a lone, crackling fire, their voices rising in a single, somber litany. The relentless crash of waves against the black rocks provided a fitting drumbeat to their prayer. This ritual, said before every mealtime, had become as essential as the food itself. Stripped of magic, possessions, and proper clothing, they pinned every hope on Voldemort's eventual return, just as devotedly as they had in the days before Azkaban vanished. Their diet was as dire as their circumstances. Fat rats, skewered on branches soaked in seawater, formed the bulk of their sustenance. Only recently had they dared to add bats and cockroaches to their meager fare. In secret, each man and woman would chew on tiny fragments of Horcrux, believing these cursed relics to be potent tonics, but the rat remained their staple. None indulged more eagerly in these Horcrux supplements than Rodolphus Lestrange, ever the ardent disciple of arcane health practices. Night after night, the Death Eaters clung to their ritual and their bleak provisions, convinced that each prayer, each morsel, brought them one step closer to the Dark Lord's triumphant return and their own salvation. Rodolphus Lestrange felt his emotions pulling him in two directions. On one side, he reveled in the steady rise of his own power. On the other, he fretted that Bellatrix's pregnancy might delay Lord Voldemort's long-anticipated return. Driven by both ambition and anxiety, he even taught himself the so-called bubble conjuration spell, nicknamed Fish Bubbles, without waiting for a mentor. He had to admit, a little illicit research can be surprisingly effective. When he and Bellatrix later prepared a dinner of actual fish, they discovered why the rest of the inner circle steered clear. Fish carried a peculiar, disorienting magic that set their heads spinning. Rodolphus was fascinated, but that wasn't the night's biggest surprise. While fetching herbs in the kitchen, he stumbled upon Bellatrix in the arms of his brother, Rabastan. To keep the liaison from derailing Voldemort's plans, Rodolphus quietly took Rabastan's place until matters returned to normal. He'd grown accustomed to deception, first fooling the Dark Lord himself, now outwitting his own brother. Best not to stir up more trouble before Voldemort was fully resurrected. As they drifted back to the main hall, Antonin Mulciber appeared, wrinkling his nose at the lingering fishy aroma. "Rodolphus, enjoying gourmet fare again, I see, and you, Bella, sneaking off for fish every day? What's that about?" With that, Mulciber turned on his heel, muttering disdainfully, and took a long draw from his rat-tail ale. On this barren island, he developed a strange appetite for raw rat tails. He rarely even roasted them, preferring their brittle snap, which reminded him oddly of his favorite Italian pasta. "There's something wrong with that fish," Rabastan said, concern creasing his brow as he studied his brother. "Its effect on wizards is far more potent than anything I've seen. You look weaker every hour." His gaze drifted to Bella, clad in tattered silks that nevertheless accentuated her fresh, springtime glow. Since they'd eaten that mysterious fish, he'd found his sister-in-law unexpectedly alluring, no doubt another of the fish's strange side effects. Shrugging off his worries, he sank his teeth into the rat's skull. A loud crunch echoed through the camp. Lestrange's boasted jaws of iron and teeth like steel. Tearing through bone was little more than child's play. Here on the island, aside from his brother and Bella, no one matched his strength. His secret lay in drawing extra energy into his bones, a power that made him virtually invincible. With true magic fading from the world, raw physical might was the only path to supremacy, and he intended to seize the throne. Rabastan Lestrange watched Barty Crouch Jr. with thinly veiled suspicion. Fresh from Azkaban and the youngest among them, Crouch Jr. now spent his days tending to his father's severed head as though it were the greatest treasure on this forsaken island. To Rabastan, that very devotion marked him as a threat, an upstart poised to challenge the Lestrange family's hard-won dominance in Voldemort's absence. But Crouch Jr. was blissfully unaware of any power struggle. His mind was singularly focused on one mission, surviving and thriving until the Dark Lord's promised return. He firmly believed that a true disciple's duty began with self-preservation, and so he devoted himself to three pillars: eating well, sleeping well, and revisiting his magic at every spare moment. That meant turning the island's meager wildlife into high-protein feasts. Field mice roasted over coals were nothing short of gourmet. Cockroaches and even bats, he discovered, offered surprising sustenance. To an outsider, his diet might have seemed grim, but Crouch Jr. saw it as essential training. He even carried a battered copy of 100 Questions on Desert Island Survival, an unlikely manual recovered by Mulciber, and studied it as earnestly as any treatise on the dark arts. Now, having polished off a plump mouse, he sat cross-legged beside the flickering fire, using his teeth to extract the last morsels from the brittle bones. The waxy pages of his survival guide glowed in the ember's light, each paragraph on shelter building and water purification carefully underlined. Then he looked down at his tunic, threadbare, patched, barely more than rags, and let out a long, exasperated sigh. "How long before this thing falls apart?" he muttered to himself. Even on a desert island, the smallest inconvenience could feel like a dire threat. And Crouch Jr., faithful servant, self-appointed survivor, intended to eliminate every one of them before Voldemort's triumphant return. Giant leaves had become their lifeline, shielding them from Azkaban's brutal sun, straining murky water, even wrapping fresh wounds. In a prison overflowing with corpses, you'd think clothes would be in endless supply. Yet the Dark Lord's resurrection magic had reduced every garment to ashes. After days of foraging and hunting, what little fabric remained was nothing more than ragged shreds. He caught his gaze drifting to Bella, seated across from him, her tunic hanging in tattered strips. He couldn't deny the strange flutter in his chest at the sight. He remembered the feast by the reef a few days earlier, when freshly caught fish felt like a miracle. In the rush of filleting and devouring that bounty, he and Bella had tumbled into a moment of blurred intimacy. It wasn't until the sudden appearance of his father's severed head, grisly and dusted with those same magic sparks, that reality snapped back. He'd fled the makeshift camp in turmoil, unable to stay for whatever came next. All he could recall afterward was the shock of pressing his lips to his father's scalp. Just beneath the clean cut at the neck, a shriveled horklap fungus had sprouted, its dark magic a silent testament to the horrors they'd suffered. Since that day, he'd guarded his appetite for horklap jealously. Claiming to hunt for game, he would slip away from the others, digging among the roots to unearth those twisted fungi. His secret feasts alone were the only comfort he dared indulge in. "I'm sorry, but I can't help with that." "Excellent. Time for training." Rabistan's eyes followed Crouch Jr. as he strode away across the courtyard. He felt a surge of unease. That boy was clearly plotting to undermine the Lestrange hegemony, and Rabistan had no intention of letting him escape scrutiny. "He mustn't be allowed to slip through our fingers," he thought, narrowing his gaze on Crouch's departing back. Rabistan hesitated by the fire. "Father, can we?" The younger Mulciber shot his father a pointed look. At that, the elder Mulciber, having already eaten the mouse except for its tail, which he'd sucked on but never swallowed, gave a satisfied nod. It was time for him and his son to share a snack. Meanwhile, Bella and Rodolphus exchanged a quick glance and slipped away toward the one room in the old prison where they'd stashed their freshest fish, Bubbles still glistening with seawater. Rabistan remained alone by the dying embers, still half in a daze. Far overhead, Ryan made a casual wave of his hand. Instantly, the ghostly projections of the Death Eaters that had hovered around the deserted island shimmered and vanished. Kate scowled. If Ryan hadn't magically transformed their voices into glowing words above everyone's heads, she never would have realized how utterly chaotic this gathering had become. "So," Ryan said, his tone light but edged with pride, "you all appreciate what I've done for you, don't you?" A hush fell over the group. Kate's lips curled in disgust as she remembered her own revolted expression up on the tower just days before. Ryan noticed and laughed softly. "You should be glad I didn't show you the more unpleasant things." With that, the tension broke, and a new, uneasy quiet settled over the ruined fortress. "You can't say that," Penelope snapped. "At least Travers doesn't love," Fleur shot back, her voice laced with irritation. "And Mulciber's relationship with his son, that's even stranger." Penelope wrinkled her nose in disgust. "Are all you British like this?" Fleur's sapphire blue eyes blinked innocently. "Hey, I'm French. Mind your manners." Ugh, are you insane? Kate rolled her eyes. She'd never cared for Fleur's theatrics. You're so insufferable. I'm not like that, Ryan interjected with a shrug, stepping between them. His calm settled the room, and after a moment of awkward silence, the others sank back into their seats. 10 minutes later, the argument forgotten, they regrouped around the table. Penelope cleared her throat. So, about those poems the Death Eaters were chanting, what were they? Kate's round eyes shone with curiosity. Yes, and how did they know the exact minute Voldemort would be resurrected? I saw it in your memories, Ryan. From your point of view, you felt his heartbeat return the instant the ritual completed. Penelope leaned forward. Those Death Eaters should be incredibly powerful. Why didn't they use any protective magic? Fleur tilted her head, a rueful smile playing on her lips. She extended a slender hand and, with a soft crackle, an orange-yellow flame sparked to life over her palm. Even I can produce a flame like this, she teased. Ryan watched the flame dance. It's not about raw power, he explained quietly. During the resurrection, every Death Eater had to concentrate fully on the ritual's incantation. Any protective charm or defensive spell would have disrupted the precise timing they needed. Penelope nodded thoughtfully. So they were forced to choose between their own safety and the success of the ceremony. A grim trade-off, Kate said softly. Fleur let the flame gutter out, folding her hands in her lap. One by one, they absorbed Ryan's words, each lost in thought about the dark ritual's exacting demands and the price the Death Eaters paid for Voldemort's return. Fleur's puzzled expression told him everything. She still didn't understand. Ryan rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. Unlike Penelope and Kate, who both drew on years of magical theory and mental conditioning, Fleur relied solely on that so-called magic potion and the supernatural strength unlocked by refining her own blood. She had no idea just how powerful she'd become. Right now, in that island dimension, Voldemort's very existence functions like a divine will, Ryan said quietly. Every Death Eater branded with the Dark Mark can pinpoint the exact instant of his resurrection. He paused, meeting Kate's eyes. That's why they're able to hunt him so efficiently, even without relying on other spells or any real-world Muggle life experience. It's as if they're all under the influence of some drug, like Felicity, that heightens their senses. He turned to Penelope. And about his heartbeat. The moment Voldemort returns, it isn't a normal pulse. It doesn't so much beat as flicker. Barely there, detectable only by wizards at my level. His body only fully recovers after 37 weeks, 259 days in total. Fleur's mouth opened, but no words came. She still looked lost. Ryan sighed inwardly. They had a long road ahead before she could grasp the true extent of what they were up against. Ryan glanced at Fleur, his expression serious. About the magic issue you're worried about. When Voldemort was resurrected, the Death Eaters surrendered most of their magical strength to him. They only had tiny scraps of power left, just enough, in theory, to perform minor spells if they had functioning wands. Fleur frowned. But they don't. Their wands were all broken, you said? Ryan nodded. Accidents, supposedly. That's why they can't channel even those remnants. Thousands of miles away, in an eerily quiet Hogwarts courtyard, Arthur Weasley leaned against the ancient stonework, peering up at the castle towers. His thinning red hair was swept this way and that by a playful breeze. Professor Dumbledore, he called, voice soft but carrying. I haven't been back here in years. Dumbledore, his beard and hair now pure white, stood beside him, hands tucked into his robes. Then let us make it an occasion, he suggested. Shall we take this conversation up to the Gryffindor common room? Arthur gave a light chuckle, stroking the wall as if greeting an old friend. I'd like that. The old headmaster sighed, gaze drifting over the courtyard. Time really is the most relentless force. I almost felt as though it was still 30 years ago. A flicker of movement in Dumbledore's clear blue eyes brought him back to the present. He followed the sound, and so did Arthur, watching in surprise as a dark shape, vast like a bat, emerged from the shadows of a nearby corridor, gliding silently toward them. As soon as they entered the dimly lit chamber, the sight of the professor's pale, ginger-tinted skin and the cold clarity of his voice sent a shiver through the room. Severus Snape stood before them. Known to all as Hogwarts Potions Master, here he had assumed another role. a co-conspirator in Dumbledore's secret plan to poison the Death Eaters. Both Snape and Weasley understood why they had been summoned, though each silently hoped the headmaster would say nothing more. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes swept over them. "I trust we're all clear on the matter at hand." Weasley rose, brushing back his hair. "I believe you're already aware of what we found in those coastal waters." "Please, have a seat," Dumbledore said, snapping his fingers. In an instant, 3 comfortable cedar chairs appeared behind them. Snape, Weasley, and Dumbledore settled into their places. Weasley cleared his throat. "Our investigation confirms one thing. The missing prisoners from Azkaban are still maintaining contact with the outside world." Snape leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "If we incorporate my new potion into the supplies, then in a year's time, the only Death Eater we'll have left to worry about is, quite possibly, Voldemort himself." A hush fell over the room. Even Dumbledore's expression turned grave as he contemplated the staggering implications of Snape's words. "That won't work." Dumbledore's eyes narrowed as he regarded Snape and Arthur Weasley. "You know very well that Tom and I have already divided the maritime sector after our investigation. If this were something I could fix with potions alone," he continued, a hint of exasperation creeping into his voice, "I would have done it long ago." Arthur frowned. "Then why have you sent for us, Headmaster?" A flicker of realization passed over Arthur's face. This meeting wasn't truly about brewing. Snape, too, stiffened, curious what the Headmaster would possibly need from the two of them. "Grindelwald," Dumbledore announced, his tone suddenly serious. "My old friend will be arriving at Hogwarts ahead of schedule, and he'll be accompanied by delegates from the German and Austrian Ministries of Magic." He turned to Arthur. "Arthur, you're the most suitable person to receive them on behalf of the Ministry." Arthur nodded. As the only senior Ministry official present who knew these delegates' backgrounds, the task naturally fell to him. "And Severus," Dumbledore added, shifting his gaze to Snape, "I expect you'll be quite occupied over the coming days." Snape's lips curled into a reluctant smirk. "Care to explain, Headmaster?" he asked, his voice cool and clipped. Professor Dumbledore leaned forward, adjusting his half-moon spectacles as he studied Professor Castrobusker. "You know their Hogwarts origins and individual strengths better than anyone. This year's competition rules have changed, and the challengers plan to conduct a preliminary inspection." He paused for effect, then added, "As our potions master, you're ideally suited to oversee every detail." A faint smile touched Dumbledore's lips as he straightened in his chair. Beyond these walls, a chapter of events had been sealed and remains unreleased, for now. Here's what you need to know. On a windswept, deserted island, the Death Eaters gathered to renew their dark vows. They chanted that the Dark Lord's heartbeat would quicken in 37 weeks, that he would regain consciousness in 100 days, that his power would be fully restored within 10 months. And at last, that in a single decisive day, he would claim the world once more. This fervent prophecy became their rallying cry. Those island antics, however outlandish, belong to another tale. Today, our attention returns to Hogwarts and to the challenges that lie ahead. Chapter 46, The Grand Group Potion and the Mysterious Gift. Seated in his office, Snape tapped his fingers on the desk, eyeing Dumbledore curiously. "Why not involve Professor Sprout? Those students from Castrumbush, raised in the heart of the rainforest, are practically born loving magical flora." Dumbledore smiled, steepling his fingers. "Ah, but I suspect Professor Sprout's greenhouse treasures would give Castrumbush students an overwhelming advantage. This contest isn't about herbology alone." Snape frowned. "It isn't?" "No," said Dumbledore patiently. "This championship is an entirely new event. Every student from every school competes on equal footing. It's designed to showcase each institution's collective strengths. Black magic, alchemy, and herbology aren't the sole focus." Snape leaned forward. "So if herbology isn't pivotal, does that mean potion-making still plays a part? Can competitors use potions, either their own creations or ones brewed by classmates?" "Aha," Dumbledore twinkled. "You've hit upon the subtler point. The centerpiece of this tournament is the mass magic potion, an ancient collaborative brew that has all but vanished from modern magical practice. Participating schools must produce it together, pooling their knowledge and ingredients." Snape's dark eyes narrowed. Group potions? And you say the Castrumbush delegation came all this way specifically for that? Exactly, Dumbledore said. They believe their deep understanding of magical plants will give them a leg up. But success here demands more than just proficiency with flora. It requires seamless teamwork and balanced mastery across multiple disciplines. Snape leaned back, considering the challenge. A test of unity rather than expertise in any single field. Very well, this should be interesting. Dumbledore stood, lifting his wand. Indeed, Severus, let the mass magic potion and the unexpected gifts it reveals begin. With that, the two professors exchanged knowing smiles, already anticipating the surprises the competition would bring. Group potions, as their name implies, can't be brewed by a single wizard. They demand the coordinated efforts of several practitioners. In ancient times, shamans would craft these elixirs for tribal chieftains, ensuring victory on the battlefield. With the rise of modern potion science, however, they've largely been supplanted by single brewer alternatives, though those often require far more time to complete. Exactly as you suspected, Dumbledore said with a pleased nod. Castrumbush remains the cutting edge of group potion research. They boast the finest potion masters in the world. Snape folded his arms. So the Austrian and German officials are pressing to include Arthur. They know he has a personal connection. Your former lover is involved behind the scenes, so he'll approach the mission with extra caution. Weasley glanced between them. Then why not send Alastor? Mad-Eye's reputation for suspicion is exactly what we need. Dumbledore rubbed his chin. True, and now that he's retired, there'd be fewer official entanglements. His words trailed off as he weighed the proposal, the firelight dancing in his thoughtful eyes. Better to have Arthur receive them, Snape said immediately, since he looks so innocent and guileless. Dumbledore nodded. I trust Moyer Gettler, but I remain cautious about the Saints. Snape frowned. The Saints? Dumbledore's expression grew serious. They also call themselves the Witch Party, firm believers in wizard supremacy who disdain both Muggle-borns and purebloods. Their ideology remains alarmingly persistent. I'm not so much doubting Gettler personally, as I am worrying that her influence might spread unchecked through the newly reopened British wizarding community. If Arthur hosts them, I'm convinced the situation will be far more temperate. Snape tapped his fingers together. You've assigned Arthur Weasley to meet the Durmstrang delegation, and you've asked me to handle the Castellabruxo guests. Who's to welcome Beauxbatons? Dumbledore's eyes led. My skills in alchemy haven't grown rusty. If you know the headmistress at Beauxbatons, you'll understand. Snape raised an eyebrow. Hagrid, or myself, Dumbledore added with a playful smile. Or both, Snape suggested. Very well, both, Dumbledore agreed. He stood, stretched his long arms, and let out a satisfied sigh. Only then did Harry realize how long he'd stayed at the Burrow. He hadn't checked a calendar in days, nor tallied the latest issues of the Daily Prophet. Time, it seemed, had simply slipped away. These days, Harry's routine was delightfully simple. He either holed up in his room, practicing the cutting charm on puddings until he could carve perfect letters, or he wandered the village with Ginny. The two of them had even climbed Ferret Hill together in search of rabbit burrows, an expedition Ron refused to join. But at least Fred and George had spirited Ron away to test their latest inventions, much to Harry's relief. He'd resigned himself to these lazy summer days stretching aimlessly until Hogwarts resumed, until a familiar flurry of wings changed everything. One bright morning, Harry was in the Burrow's kitchen, carefully spreading butter on Ginny's toast, when he heard an owl swoop down behind him. Hello, Hedwig, he said, turning just as the snowy owl landed on the windowsill. Ginny, ever eager to play hostess, broke off a small piece of her meat pie and held it out. Hedwig pecked gratefully at the morsel. Harry's sharp eyes caught sight of a letter tied to Hedwig's right leg. What's this? He murmured. Ginny cooed as she stroked the owl's feathers. You look tired, girl, but where did this letter come from? With a practiced flick, Harry untied the parchment and laid it on the table. Ginny leaned over his shoulder, resting her head against his as they prepared to read the unexpected news from Hagrid. Ginny stared at the parchment in disbelief. Dear Harry, how are things at the Burrow these days? Hogwarts has been overrun with strangers, heads and professors from the 3 other schools competing in the tournament. I've got to ask, is that book Ron loaned you, 12 Secrets to Charming Witches, really any good? He told me you used it to win Ginny's heart. Oh, and happy early birthday. I've sent a gift by Hedwig. You'll be gobsmacked. Your friend, Rubius Hagrid. She tossed the letter onto the table. This hypocrite, she muttered, anger curling in her voice. So now Hagrid's fallen for someone else. Harry looked up from his chair. Blimey, what's happened? Ginny snatched the quill from his grasp and jabbed at the empty parchment. I need to reply right away. I'm not sure I trust anything that book teaches. It might do more harm than good. Harry blinked. Hagrid, with a crush on another witch? He rubbed his temple. And Ron said it would be fine? Ginny snorted. Well, Ron can't wait another second. She passed Harry the quill. Write quickly. Harry rose, knocking his chair back with a clatter. Right, hold on. He spun around too fast and collided with Ginny, bumping her forehead. Ouch! Ginny pressed a hand to her brow, scowling. Merlin, Harry, watch where you're going. He unfolded his arms sheepishly. Sorry, I was just impatient, I suppose. Ginny's lips curved into a grin. You're all over the place today. But hey, didn't Hagrid mention a gift? Harry's eyes lit up. Oh, right. Where is it? They exchanged a glance, curiosity and exasperation mingling on their faces, as the burrow settled into its usual chaos around them. I almost forgot. Harry glanced around the room. Could it be that only Ron's heard all the gossip about Hagrid's love affair? Hedwig cocked her snowy white head and peered down at the floor, rapping her beak against something hard. Harry knelt and lifted a corner of it, a book. At first glance, he knew exactly which one. Please tell me it isn't that blasted 12 winning treasures to charm witches, he groaned. Ginny buried her face in her hands. Believe me, I wish it weren't. I know what it is, damn it, she began, but Harry tee her off. With a flick of his fingers, he tore back half the cover and revealed the familiar emerald green binding. As if offended, the book sprang to life. It hopped upright, then scuttled across the tabletop on its corner like some bizarre crab. Ha! What is this? Harry muttered in surprise, as Ginny let out an exasperated sigh. 10 minutes later, Ginny was slumped on the floor, her hair falling across her face as she panted. The little green book skittered from chair leg to chair leg, proudly displaying its pages whenever Harry tried to snatch it. Obviously, it's a book, Ginny wheezed. Can we just get this over with? She rose unsteadily, leaving Harry free of her wandering elbows. In a single swift motion, he slammed his hand, cover and all, down on the book. The frantic scuttling ceased at once, and the chamber fell silent. Harry pressed down a moment longer, then finally released it, ready to deal with whatever mischief that infernal grimoire had in store. Chapter 47, Hagrid's Love and the Magical Monsters. Monster Book of Monsters? Ginny held up the enormous leather-bound textbook, its title gleaming in gold. This must be our magical biology text, she said, arching an eyebrow at Harry. His hair, unusually neat today, only added to her amusement. If you hadn't asked me for help tracking this down, you'd never have snagged it. Harry cleared his throat, eager to change the subject. He raised his voice just enough so Ron, wherever he was, could hear. Speaking of Hagrid's letter, he mentioned that the heads and professors from the other 3 schools have already arrived at Hogwarts. So, who do you think Hagrid's special guest will be? Beauxbatons, of course, Ginny replied without hesitation. Harry rolled his eyes. Didn't you and Ron both fall for that last time? Ginny let out an exasperated sigh and shot Harry a sour look. No, really. If Hagrid has a secret crush, it'll be on a half-blood Vila. She folded her arms triumphantly, as if daring Harry to contradict her, and for once she was probably right. Just then, Ron stumbled down the stairs, drawn by the volume of their conversation. He yawned widely, tousling his own hair, and paused to see what all the fuss was about. Harry rubbed his eyes and shook his head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. Ginny, how did you find out? That woman isn't a half-blood Vila. I've heard she's as tall as Hagrid, and people say she's the new headmistress of Beauxbatons. Ginny's eyes widened. Part giant and headmistress? Imagine if Hogwarts hired a half-giant professor. Parents would be up in arms, demanding his dismissal. She looked at Ron. Did Hagrid tell you this? For once, even patient Harry was at a loss for words. Hagrid had spilled every detail of his latest crush to Ron, Yet whenever Harry asked him for advice about his own feelings, Hagrid disappeared into secrecy. "No," Ron admitted. "Wayne told me." He shrugged. "She never volunteered her ancestry, just like Hagrid never mentions his family background." Ron glanced back at Ginny. Harry shot a silent apology to Hagrid and pressed on. "But how did she learn all this? Through Filch? Did Filch even let her inside Hogwarts?" He wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or worried for Miss Campbell. Then again, everyone's tastes differ. Perhaps this match would turn out well for her in the end. "Campbell herself?" Ron exclaimed, leaning forward. "She's at Hogwarts as the squib representative." Ginny nodded. "She's remarkable. Even though she was born a squib, she's carved out a place in the wizarding world, held her own, and landed a decent job." Ron sighed, then picked up a crumpled parchment from the table. "Blimey," he scanned the page. "Hagrid doesn't believe me. He went straight to Harry and asked him, like Harry knows anything. Now he's being chased by Ginny." Harry and Ginny bristled, but Ron ignored them. He jabbed a green-covered book that was pinned under Harry's elbow. "Oi, Harry, your birthday's coming up." He pushed the book fully into view. "Here, this is your present. So when we head to Flourish and Blots for school books, you don't need to buy this one." Harry freed the book, still trying to slide from under his arm. "What's the date today?" he asked Ginny. She glanced at her watch. "The 29th. As a Daily Prophet reporter, she never missed a date. "So Hagrid's 2 days early," Harry observed, turning the book over in his hands. "He must really care about that woman. Sent it before the 31st. "You know Hagrid," Ginny added with a grin. "He always delivers on the 31st. Harry offered a rueful smile and let out a soft sigh. Ron barely heard Harry's next words. His eyes were fixed on the emerald-green cover of the book in front of him. "Professor Kelborn's never changed the textbook before," Ron said, voice low. "With all the recent upheavals at Hogwarts and Dumbledore hinting that every student will compete by year's end, this might actually be a manual from one of the other 3 wizarding schools." "Exactly." Harry Reed, narrowing his eyes. They shared a quick glance, adrenaline already beginning to buzz in their veins. Then, as if on cue, both of them flipped the cover open. "Merlin's beard. Look at this!" Harry exclaimed. The pages were filled edge to edge with color illustrations, annotations in fiery red ink, and stern warning labels that made their pulses spike. "Dangerous magical creatures," Ron read aloud, voice full of awe. "Rated at least XXXX. Harry beckoned to Ginny, still wrestling one corner of the snarling monster book of monsters under his hand. "Ginny, come see this." Ginny hurried over. Ron pointed at a detailed drawing. "That's the bird-shaped man-eating monster I saw on a Muggle documentary, only I thought it was just special effects." Harry skimmed the description. "This half-avian, half-reptilian creature is a distant cousin of the basilisk's closest relatives. It can't breathe fire, but its serrated fangs can cut through bone like butter. Its plumage, more like fur, really, is bulletproof." Ron grinned. "It's also insanely curious, which apparently makes it easier to trap if you don't mind risking a few broken bones. And get this, its heart nerve is valued as a wand core." They all leaned in closer, flipping through more pages. If this book truly came from another magical school, then Hogwarts had much more than just new teachers to worry about. The upcoming competition, whatever Dumbledore had in store, was about to get a lot more dangerous. Harry flipped through the heavy tome and found the entry he was looking for. "Here, Kappa," he announced, tracing the words with his finger. "It's a Japanese magical creature. The book says it's not meant for contests, but what if the organizers decide otherwise?" "Hold on, Harry. Don't turn the page yet," Ron warned, leaning over to block him as Ginny peered curiously at the margins. Harry relaxed and let the page rest. "It says a kappa looks like a scaly monkey with webbed hands," he read aloud. "There's a little bowl-shaped cavity on its head filled with water. That water is the source of its strength." Ginny's eyes went wide. "And it attacks unsuspecting swimmers who wade into its pond, strangling them to death." Ron ran a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. So how do we deal with one of these things?" The 3 of them rifled through the rest of the chapter. Ginny flipped a few more pages, then grinned. "Listen to this. Offer the kappa a cucumber carved with your name, and it may spare you. Better still, trick it into bowing. When the water spills from its head dish, it loses all its power." Harry nodded. Then a simple levitation charm should knock the water right out of its head, render it harmless. Ginny let out a relieved sigh. Excellent. That's one creature sorted. Let's move on. Group the rest by region. Leaning in together over the open book, they began crossing off each monster on their growing list. They settled into a quiet corner of the common room, the worn leather cover of the ancient bestiary creaking as Ginny opened it to the next entry. We may encounter creatures from France, Germany, and Brazil, Ginny read, tracing the faded script with her finger. Dragon catchers handle dragons, so those will likely count toward our house's score. Harry frowned as he leaned forward. Let's see. Golems. He paused, lips curling in disgust. These things are like oversized elves, bigger than goblins, about 3 feet tall, with long, pointed faces. And get this, they're drawn to the scent of children. What? Ron shot to his feet, indignation flaring. Monsters like that living here? They deserve to be wiped out. He jabbed a finger at the page. According to this, they mostly infest the Black Forest in Germany. Ginny flipped to the next entry. Here. Jinn. Their piercing laughter is said to entrance children, luring them away from grown-ups before they're eaten. She swallowed hard. Fortunately, in 1927, the German Ministry of Magic imposed strict controls on jinn populations. Harry exhaled, relief softening his features. Thank Merle, and they got that under control. Ginny snapped the book shut and tucked it under her arm. Let's hope the rest of our creatures are a bit less terrifying. Chapter 48, Mission 5, The Horcrux's Whereabouts. Harry never imagined that, beyond dragons, the magical world teemed with so many lethal creatures, beings whose powers outstripped even those of the most skilled wizards. There were basilisk serpents whose very gaze could kill on sight, chimeras so fearsome that only one wizard in recorded history has ever slain one, horned water snakes crowned with iridescent gems that granted them both invisibility and flight, and strange, pallid wraiths, creatures as chilling as dementors, driven only back by the Patronus charm. Then there were the manticores, hulking beasts with armor-like hides that repelled almost every known spell, yet astonishingly articulate, embodying a savage intelligence that forever barred them from being called human. Even more unsettling were the panther cats, whose emerald eyes could hypnotize a wizard and probe his thoughts, leaving him a puppet in their paws. And these were only the known threats. Harry's research hinted at hundreds of other, nameless entities so poorly understood that no witch or wizard could say how or even if they might strike. As Harry closed the leather-bound bestiary, he steeled himself for Mission 5, tracking down the next Horcrux. In a world filled with unimaginable dangers, Voldemort's remaining soul shards would be just one more peril to face. And if Harry was to succeed, he would have to outwit them all. The living room coffee table was strewn with the latest issue of the Quibbler, open to an article titled Magical Creatures by Classification Level. Ron and Ginny crouched over its pages, rehearsing what they'd learned for their next Care of Magical Creatures lesson. Level 1, Dakuwaga, Ron read aloud, pointing at a grainy photograph. Native to Fiji, they can shift back and forth between human and shark forms. Level 2, Bigfoot, Ginny continued, still a mystery, known only for those massive footprints. They flipped the page. Level 3, the phoenix bird, an elegant firebird bred in Japan, almost indistinguishable from a true phoenix. And Level 4, Kurapira, Ron added, a short, bright red elf with impossibly long legs, rumored to lurk in Brazil's jungles. Ginny's finger hovered over the final entry. Level 5, Sasabants, a thin-legged, blood-sucking creature. They're even the mascot for Nigeria's national Quidditch team. Just then, the kitchen door swung open, and Mrs. Weasley stepped in, humming as she brushed grass from her hands. "Children, what are you two poring over now?" she asked cheerfully. "Care of Magical Creatures Revision, Mum," Ron replied without looking up. Mrs. Weasley turned her gaze on Ginny. "Ginny, love, isn't it time you were off to Luna's?" Ginny closed the magazine with a sigh. "Soon, Mum. Just a few more minutes." Mrs. Weasley smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I can't wait to see how my clever girl arranges her piece for the Quibbler's next issue on countertunes and creature calls." She ruffled Ginny's hair before ducking back outside, leaving the twins to their studies, and Ginny to her dream of writing for Luna Lovegood's magazine. At breakfast the next morning, Ginny's voice cut through the clatter of dishes. "Mom, It's the Quibbler. How could you not even remember the name? Mrs. Weasley glanced up, puzzled. Ginny tossed her hair in exasperation. Tomorrow's Saturday the 31st, Harry's birthday. I want to take the day off and go into Diagon Alley to buy him a present. She turned to Harry with a conspiratorial wink. So what would you like, Harry? It won't be a surprise if I know what it is. Harry waved her off, cheeks pink. Whatever Ginny picks out, I'm sure I'll love it. Mrs. Weasley's eyes glistened with amusement. Oh, my sweet Ginny, do you need your mother's full support on this? She rose, planted a quick kiss on Ginny's forehead, then cuddled Harry in a warm hug. I can pay for it myself, Ginny insisted. I work for the Quibbler, and they pay well enough. Hey, Ron piped up, sounding a bit wounded. What about me? Don't I your support when I want to buy Harry a gift? Of course I didn't ignore you, Mrs. Weasley said, ruffling his hair. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Ron huffed. Besides, you've both been so busy with Fred's and George's shop that even Ginny's friends overseas have heard about it. You've got to back me up here. Mrs. Weasley gave him an affectionate pinch. You're my son too, Ronald. Don't worry, your turn will come. Ginny grinned, Harry breathed a relieved sigh, and the Weasley household settled back into its usual cheerful chaos. Harry's birthday, only hours away. After lunch, Ron wouldn't stop pestering Mrs. Weasley to let him take Ginny back to Diagon Alley, and at last she relented, ordering Percy to chaperone them. Not to be outdone, Fred and George announced they'd already finished Harry's birthday present. They darted downstairs for a snack, then vaulted back up the stairs, whispering furiously over some secret project. Bill and Charlie had slipped out at dawn for work, and Mr. Weasley was buried in paperwork by the hearth. Since Harry himself was the birthday boy-to-be, he quietly slipped off to his room to avoid spoiling everyone's surprise. There, beneath the glow of his bedside lamp, he resumed the most peculiar of tasks, practicing a cutting charm on a pudding. He'd procured the pudding from a London cake shop via the Mirror World, and now he spent hours engraving message after message, 99 repetitions of Ginny so far, each time mending a bad cut with a restoration charm before trying again. Time vanished in this endless loop of incantation, error, and repair. He was so absorbed that he only realized it was bedtime when footsteps and laughter drifted up the stairs. At dusk, Ron, Ginny, and the rest returned down the lane in the fading light, just in time to tuck Harry in and let him dream of tomorrow's celebration. Harry heard a soft knock on his door, and to his own astonishment, he actually answered. He exchanged a few words with Ron and the others before trudging downstairs to join them for dinner. The vividness of those moments struck him as odd. Then it clicked. While he'd been training in the Mirror World and heard the summons from the real one, he'd unconsciously fashioned a secondary body filled with idle thoughts. That construct had slipped into reality in his stead, eating, speaking, living Harry's life without him realizing it. By the time he recognized the deception, he stood back in the Mirror World, clutching a pudding inscribed with Ginny's name 100 times, and the jumbled memories came rushing back. Ripples fanned outward across the mirror's surface, and Harry stepped through them, returning to the night-shrouded castle. Everything was silent. In his vision, Task 4 was crossed out, and a new directive gleamed before him. Task 5. Return to the site where the Horcrux was destroyed, the Mirror World. Note, absorb the remaining traces and memories. They will guide you toward equilibrium. No sooner had the message appeared than a cold surge shot through Harry's brow, leaving it swollen and throbbing. He felt in his bones that this challenge would be his hardest yet. A sudden voice echoed inside Harry's mind, uttering words of ancient ritual magic. As the spell washed over him, he felt an overwhelming surge of power, and with it, a cascade of grand titles. Creator of 1,000 stars, Master of the opposite world, the one who has escaped fate and wields divine might. The incantation continued. Those who share your destiny, call out your name in your hidden kingdom. All remaining fragments and memories shall awaken under your third vision of fate and be reborn. Harry's heart pounded. Creator of stars? Opposite world. Was that the mirror realm he sometimes glimpsed in his dreams? Divine power? People sharing his destiny. Did he mean Harry himself? And a hidden kingdom where his name is invoked? What would it mean to have his memories reborn under some third vision? Questions swirled so thickly that Harry nearly lost track of the present. But then, his mind snapped back to something all too real. Horcruxes. The only objects that had caused him, and the wizarding world, such pain and peril. He closed his eyes and reviewed each one he'd helped destroy. Godric Gryffindor's sword had done away with the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, but that had only freed the sword. Marvolo Gaunt's ring had been shattered by Dumbledore's hand atop the astronomy tower. Salazar Slytherin's locket had been ripped apart in the depths of the Black family house's boiler room. Helga Hufflepuff's cup that had been destroyed in the cavern after the confrontation with the Inferi, and the last, Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, had fallen, quite literally, in the Room of Requirement. Each victory had left its scars. Each destroyed Horcrux had altered the world and Harry himself, in ways he was only beginning to understand. Now, with this cryptic message promising new visions and rebirth, he sensed that the next stage of his journey, and perhaps his greatest challenge, was just beginning. Harry learned from Dumbledore that the Horcrux hidden in the Lestrange family vault at the bottom of Gringotts had been destroyed. Riddle's diary remains intact, however, and so does the Resurrection Stone, also turned into a Horcrux, which now represents Voldemort's ultimate goal, the hope of resurrecting his mother. The Ravenclaw diadem is yet another Horcrux. Helena confided in Harry that the diadem in his possession had been reforged by Rowena Ravenclaw herself, while the one Helena stole was in fact snatched away by Riddle, that is, Voldemort. Judging by Voldemort's treatment of Slytherin's locket and Hufflepuff's cup, it seems clear he transformed those relics into Horcruxes as well. Beyond these, Harry has no knowledge of any other Horcruxes. Chapter 49, A Strange Gift. Magic always leaves a trace. Harry knew that better than most. He'd once created extra bodies with the aid of Ryan's enchanted necklace, and he wasn't surprised to discover it in use again. This morning, though, his mind wasn't on illusory duplicates. He was consumed by the question of the Horcruxes. Where exactly had they been destroyed? So far, he was certain of only 2 locations, and 2 might not be enough. If more Horcrux fragments remained, he would have to track them down in the real world, obliterate them, and then reconvene the ritual in the Mirror Realm. What if new fragments surfaced afterward? And then there was Professor Riddle. Harry had learned that Riddle's father-in-law had hidden vital information in his home. Was it worth attacking a seemingly decent man just to resurrect his mother? The moral and magical puzzles twisted together in his thoughts until he found himself shrugging off his clothes, tossing aside his shoes, and collapsing into bed without even washing up. Sleep came instantly. When morning light crept in through the window, Harry woke to the soft tilt of feathers. An owl was fluttering just outside, its wings beating against the glass. The sunlight fell warm on his face, but it was the bird's arrival that truly roused him. It didn't hoot like Haywide's owl, nor did it carry the familiar stamped envelope of the Daily Prophet. Harry blinked awake, puzzlement sharpening his senses. With a small groan, he sat up and peered toward the window. Whoever, or whatever, had sent this visitor, it clearly wasn't business as usual. And somehow, Harry knew, this was the beginning of something very strange indeed. A brown, long-eared owl swooped down the moment Harry stirred, circled once in midair, then alighted daintily on the foot of his bed. Hedwig let out an imperious hoot, as though she disapproved of the newcomer's eagerness. Harry pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, untied the letter from the owl's right leg, and tucked it under his pillow. The visitor gave a polite peck at the food and water Harry had thoughtfully set out for any unexpected messenger, then flitted off into the morning light. "From Hogwarts," Harry whispered, his heart leaping. The envelope felt noticeably thicker than usual. He broke the seal and smoothed out the first sheet of parchment. "Dear Mr. Potter, please be advised that the new school year will commence on September 1st. The Hogwarts Express will depart from Platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station at 11 o'clock sharp. Third-year students are permitted weekend visits to Hogsmeade. Enclosed is the required consent form for your parent or guardian's signature, along with the book list for the coming term. Yours sincerely, Professor McGonagall." Deputy Headmistress Harry scanned the parchment again. "So this is the consent form," he murmured, sliding it into his satchel. He glanced toward the window. Sirius should arrive today. It's my birthday. A broad grin spread across his face. And I finally get to go to Hogsmeade. Harry, Draco's voice rang out as he bounded up the staircase and swung the door open. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes bright with excitement, and Harry noticed, a little drawn around the edges. Probably another Pansy Parkinson marathon. Their letters suggested they were far less restrained than he and Ginny ever dared to be, and Pansy seemed determined to monopolize every spare moment of Draco's time. Draco thrust a neatly wrapped package into Harry's hands. Here, your gift. Harry eyed the parcel. You really didn't have to bring it all the way upstairs. I wanted to hand it to you myself, Draco insisted, his tone warm with anticipation. Go on, open it. Reluctantly, Harry peeled back the paper, revealing a robe of shimmering silver fabric that caught every stray beam of sunlight. He blinked. This is something else, Draco beamed. I had it made at Madame Malkin's. Custom job. It uses Walker Enterprises' new composite material. Harry ran his fingers over the fee, weave, and couldn't resist trying it on. He slipped it over his shoulders, the robe draped around him perfectly, the metallic sheen accentuating every crease. Very showy, he commented, a grin tugging at his lips. Then he stepped toward the window, letting a shaft of sunlight hit the fabric. Whoa, this actually feels kind of cool. That's the clever part, Draco said, folding his arms. The composite fiber reflects sunlight and stays as cool as water. Even in the hottest sun, you'll feel like you're standing in deep shade. Before either of them could say more, Ron, who'd been perched on the landing below, popped to his feet, eyes wide with astonishment. My legs are about to give out from all this squatting, Ron grumbled, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Hidden behind Draco for cover, he'd been crouching so long that his knees were protesting. He stamped his foot and extended a small box toward Harry. Here, this is for you. Harry peered into the box with a grin. Inside lay a pair of surprisingly lightweight shoes that looked a lot like Muggle sneakers, except they carried a soft, lingering fragrance. You bought these at Tofan's clothing store? He asked. I heard they've teamed up with Walker and Skywalker Alchemical Works. Ron nodded eagerly. Yeah, these have self-cleaning and self-repairing enchantments. He paused to let that sink in. The fabric's made from phoenix down weave. It's super elastic and practically weightless, and it holds its scent indefinitely. Harry raised an eyebrow and glanced at Ron, appreciating the elaborate gift. Well, then, I guess I'll give them a try. He slipped off his old trainers and pulled on Ron's present. The shoes molded perfectly to his feet, as if they'd been custom-made. Perfect fit, Harry said, flexing his toes. Thanks, Ron. Before Ron could reply, another figure popped up behind him and Draco. Ginny bounded forward, clutching a neatly wrapped package in both hands. Here, Harry, my gift for you. Harry laughed and unwrapped the parcel. Inside lay a pair of navy blue wizarding shorts, cut to ankle length for comfort during Quidditch or casual wear. Ginny beamed. I thought these might be more practical than another pair of socks. Harry held them up, smiling. Brilliant idea, Ginny. Thanks. As Ron and Draco exchanged relieved glances, Harry headed off to try on his new clothes, feeling grateful and decidedly more comfortable than he had in hours. Take a closer look, Ginny said, stepping up to the display. These are the gloves and the shirt. She lifted the dark garment from its hanger. They're made from horned camel hide, tanned and soaked in protective potions. It repels spells incredibly well. Harry ran his fingers along the supple fabric. The shopkeeper even claimed you could wear it as a bulletproof vest, Ginny added. Think of Muggle body armor made to stop wand-crafted projectiles. Harry let out a relieved laugh. Thank Merlin. That means it's nothing to do with Watt Construction or the Skywalker Alchemy Workshop. I almost thought they'd branched into fashion. He held up the matching trousers and gloves, all identical in color and texture, so thin he might have overlooked them entirely. Horned camel hide, he repeated in wonder. You'd never guess it by looking, Ginny agreed, but it's unbelievably tough. Harry took a steadying breath and examined the creature before him. The so-called horned camel was every bit as bizarre as the legends had promised. A massive gray-purple body covered in a hide tougher than dragon scales, a ridged spine that bristled down its back, 2 gleaming golden horns atop its head, 4 spindly fingers at each hoof, and a ring of slippery tentacles surrounding its circular mouth, perfect for shoveling in mouthfuls of food. Harry knew most spells would scarcely scratch its hide. Before he could take in another detail, Ginny caught his eye and grinned. The same look Ron and Draco had exchanged moments earlier. Ron reached into a satchel and produced a pair of heavy leather gloves. "Here, put these on," he said, passing them to Harry. Harry slid his hands into the gloves. "Is that everyone?" he asked, glancing around the room. "I'm off to change into my robes," Ron replied. "If anyone else needs gloves, speak up now." Harry scanned the still assembly. No one else. Draco stepped forward, his expression nearly unreadable. "Everyone else is waiting downstairs. And you're not going to believe who's here." Ron gave Harry's shoulder a friendly squeeze. "Bill and the others have been up all night," Ginny added, "casting silencing charms on these creatures so they won't wake anyone when we bring them in." She paused, then winked. "Trust me, you'll want to see this." Harry cleared his throat. "Wait, did you forget one thing? I still have to take off Ginny's clothes before I can change into something else. I'm not some fairy godmother who can swap outfits with a snap of the fingers." He spread his hands in exasperation, utterly speechless. Chapter 50. The Humble House Without Sunlight. Harry no longer treated birthdays with the solemn reverence he once had. Ever since he set foot in the wizarding world, and especially after his godfather's name was cleared, he'd already enjoyed the kind of flawless celebration most people only dream of, a grand party at the Black family manor. Now, what really preoccupied him was a petty curiosity. Who was this unexpected guest Draco had teased him about? Beyond that, he was genuinely touched by Bill's devotion in staying up late to help organize today's festivities. Then it hit him. Neville's birthday was yesterday, and both he and Ron had completely let it slip. And as for Ryan, when on earth was his birthday? Harry frowned, shrugged, then started flipping through his little notebook, jotting down the dates of everyone who'd ever given him a gift. "Neville, July 30th, he murmured, writing it down in neat letters. "Ginny, August 11th, that's next Wednesday. And Percy, August 22nd, that's just a Sunday after Ginny's." Harry leaned back and studied the page, a small, satisfied smile forming. In all his years, he'd never cared about remembering birthdays. No one had ever given him presents in return. But now, with friends like these, he'd gladly mark every important date on his calendar. Harry's quill hovered over the parchment as he realized something troubling. He didn't even know the birthdays of people he cared about. How had he never thought to find out Hagrid's birthday, of all people? Or Professor Dumbledore's? Even though Dumbledore hadn't given him a gift for his last birthday, Harry still wanted to remember the day. Shaking off his distracted thoughts, Harry stood and dressed in the array of gifts his friends had given him. First came the shirt, crafted from some horned beast's hide, along with matching shorts and gloves, so light and perfectly fitted that he could barely feel them. Over that he draped Draco's newest wizarding robe, its cool fabric reminding him of the calm stillness beneath water. Finally, he slipped into Ron's gift, a pair of sneakers, so weightless they felt as if he were wearing clouds. Harry couldn't help but wonder if Ron and the others had somehow each chipped in to buy these items as one complete outfit. A moment later, he took a steadying breath and pushed open the door to his bedroom and stepped into another world. Behind him, the morning sunlight streamed through his windows, and the familiar hush of his little house lingered in his ears. But beyond the doorway, everything was bathed in an eerie silvery glow. No sunlight penetrated this place. The warmth and brightness of Harry's room had been swallowed whole. Chilled air whispered around his ankles, and the soft, cold luminescence seemed to crawl across every surface, obliterating any trace of the cozy world he'd just left. Harry hesitated on the threshold of the burrow, suddenly aware that something was very wrong. The warm, homey glow he remembered was gone. Instead, every surface, carpet, wallpaper, even the stair banisters, had been painted coal black. It felt like the hushed gloom of Hogwarts during nearly headless Nick's Death Day feast, only darker. He stepped inside, expecting the familiar clatter of dishes or Mrs. Weasley's cheery humming. Instead, there was only silence. The kitchen, usually alive with chatter and the smell of roasting potatoes, was empty. Harry's heart thudded. Ron had warned him he'd be absolutely gobsmacked. He'd yet to see anything. Gathering his courage, Harry crept toward the staircase. Shadows pooled at the foot of each tread, the dim light from the kitchen's solitary lamp doing little to chase them away. The old steps creaked under his weight as he descended. At the bottom, he called out, voice echoing unnaturally, "Ginny?" No answer. "Ron?" Silence. "Draco?" Still nothing. He moved into the hallway and peered down the dark corridor. "Mrs. Weasley? Mr. Weasley? Sirius? Bill?" His words faded into the gloom. Not a sound answered back. A cold trickle of dread ran up Harry's spine. He reached D for the front door handle, convinced the others must be lurking outside, waiting to leap out in some elaborate prank. Just as he turned the knob, a deafening crack split the night air. Bang! The sky outside erupted in brilliant fireworks, scattering colors across the darkness and jolting Harry's heart into his throat. He froze, dazzled by the sudden burst of light, and by the realization that whatever was happening at the burrow was far from ordinary. Several pale, icy will-o-wisps drifted into the burrow's living room, their ghostly light tracing lazy circles over the rug. Then Ron and a handful of familiar faces stepped out from behind the glowing orbs, each of them under concealment charms that hid their forms, silenced their breaths, and even cloaked their body heat. Harry, still in his transformed state, remained completely unaware of their presence. Until now. Fred and George burst into view together, broad grins plastered across their faces. "Very clever, Harry. You didn't see that coming, did you?" Fred announced, flourishing his wand. George nodded. "Fred here had the idea. Charlie and I just made it happen." Bill and Charlie followed, waving cheerfully. Charlie gave Harry a playful bow. "Bill and I take full credit for the execution." Mrs. Weasley emerged next, wagging a disapproving finger at her rascally sons, though the laughter in her eyes betrayed her fondness for the trick. "Honestly, I just couldn't let you lot get away with it," she scolded, pretending reluctance. Harry finally understood the source of Fred and George's legendary mischief. At the edge of the circle, Ron stepped forward, looking half proud, half abashed. Mrs. Weasley shook her head at him. "And your idea to cast a thermostatic charm on all of us, really, Ron? That was a bit much, wasn't it?" Mr. Weasley, his hair still plastered to his head from Draco's earlier wind blast, tugged nervously at his robes. "We're dealing with our Harry here," he stammered, "not a werewolf or a vampire." Beside him stood Percy, clad in the same disordered robes and sporting the same flattened hairdo, looking like a very stern offspring of Mr. Weasley himself. Just then, Draco Malfoy stepped out of the shadows. His pale face was lit by the flickering wisps as he cast a calculating glance at Mr. Weasley and offered up an all-too-knowing smirk in place of any explanation. Sirius stepped aside and met Harry's gaze with a respectful nod. "There's one more person here for your birthday party," he said quietly. In the next instant, Sirius's form shimmered into view, eyes soft and affectionate. Then with a stifled yawn, a tall, slender young man slipped out from behind Draco. His hair was jet black, and his skin still retained the ghostly pallor of someone who'd spent too long as an inferius. "Regulus," Harry breathed. "So the surprise guest that Draco mentioned is you?" Harry asked in sudden realization. Regulus gave a slight, sheepish shrug. Although he could now venture into the sunlight, his days as an inferius had left him strangely averse to bright light, and quite fond of shadowy corners. No wonder today's decorations were so subdued. Sirius looked a little nervous. "Harry, I hope you don't mind that I invited him. I promise I won't let it spoil your birthday. If it does, I'll send Regulus straight back and we can switch the decorations again." "Not at all," Harry said firmly. "It's perfect, actually. Your first real outing, and it happens to be my birthday." "That's wonderful," Sirius exhaled in relief. Harry caught the worry in his godfather's eyes and pressed on. "Besides, it's a lot better than that gloomy Death Day feast. Dark, freezing, and nobody even wanted to dance." Far away at Hogwarts, nearly headless Nick, hidden in his portrait room, let out a faint sneeze. Harry blinked as a sudden chill crept through his fingers. Had his blood really started flowing again? That is, was he alive enough now to catch a cold like any ordinary person? "Hello, Harry. Happy birthday," stammered Regulus, his voice catching as he offered a painful cold hand. "Thanks, Reg," Harry replied, shaking it. One by one, friends and acquaintances stepped forward with gifts. There were so many, in fact, that he couldn't open them all on the spot the way he had upstairs in the common room. Instead, he smiled at each giver, thanked them, and carefully set their packages on the long sofa behind him. For the first time ever at one of his birthdays, Harry felt like Dudley Dursley, overwhelmed by a mountain of presents. The fan gifts he'd received in the past had always felt distant, depersonalized. This pile, handed to him by name, felt unmistakably real. He glanced around, expecting someone to announce that it was time for cake. To his surprise, a strange confection hovered in midair above him, a will-o'-the-wisp of cold blue light. The ghostly cake bobbed gently, its candles flickering with an unnatural frost-tipped flame. "Whose bright idea was this?" he muttered, reaching for a knife. When he pressed the blade into the surface, the cake hissed as if burning, yet the knife warmed in his hand. Harry could only stare, mouth agape, at the floating spectacle before him. Who dreamed up this chilly illusion? Whatever it was, there was no mistaking it. This birthday would be one to remember. Chapter 51. Ryan's Journey into the Mirror World. Ryan awoke to an extraordinary morning, one that rivaled even Harry Potter's legendary birthday celebration at Hogwarts. Sharing the same birthdate as the boy who lived, Ryan found himself pulled in 3 directions at once. By some quirk of magic, he had split into 3 simultaneous versions of himself, each bound for a different birthday party. The first Ryan hurried off to Hermione Granger's cozy townhouse in London, where Hermione had planned a quiet tea party. The second made his way toward Ottery St. Catchpole Village to join Luna Lovegood at her family's home, surrounded by radish lanterns and dreamy Quibbler posters. The third Ryan stepped into the carriage that would take him back to Smith Castle, where Kate, Penelope, and Fleur awaited his arrival with presents in hand. Remarkably, Hermione and Luna had each found a way to charm Ryan's parents into staying away, thinking a little youthful mischief would make the celebrations more fun. Meanwhile, at Smith Castle, Ryan faced a more perilous challenge: 3 enchantresses under one roof. Kate and Penelope, both talented witches, were merely the warm-up. Fleur Delacour, now a formidable aura of raw magical power, loomed at the top of the grand stairwell. Even a casual handshake from her could send his senses reeling, or worse, catapult him into a state of blissful stupor. Yet Ryan was no ordinary wizard. His unusual physique and a few well-crafted distractions, carefully honed over years of training, kept Kate, Penelope, and Fleur from overwhelming him. With equal measures of charm and quick reflexes, he managed to greet each birthday girl without incident. All of this unfolded within the Mirror World, an upside-down realm of mist-shrouded paths, inverted towers, and shadowy castles that reflected the familiar landscapes of England in eerie reverse. It was as if the real world had been pressed against a giant enchanted mirror, distorting everything inside. Just as the 3 Ryans settled into their celebrations, sipping tea in London, playing radish-patterned games in Ottery, and accepting handshakes at Smith Castle, 4 figures emerged from the gloom at the heart of this strange domain. Their sudden appearance would soon upend Ryan's birthday festivities and send him on an even more astonishing adventure than any wizard's birthday could promise. Kate landed lightly on a broad oak branch and peered out over a world that felt both familiar and utterly strange. "Are we really in the mirror realm?" she wondered aloud, hopping from foot to foot as she tried to take it all in. Penelope, by contrast, remained almost motionless. She twirled a lock of hair around one finger, glanced over at Ryan, and asked quietly, "Then why aren't there any doppelgangers of us here?" Before Ryan could answer, Fleur draped herself casually over his shoulder and began to trace teasing circles on his chest with slender, pale fingers. "Doppelgangers?" she purred. "You haven't seen the little blessing I whispered to Harry yet, and Penelope, you were the one who couldn't stop laughing about it." Ryan gently pushed Fleur away and shot Penelope an exasperated look. "Honestly, you two," he sighed. "You still remember what Master of the Mirror Realm means, right?" He forced a wry smile, doing his best to keep his cool under Fleur's playful provocations. Kate and Penelope exchanged a quick glance. They'd long suspected there was more than friendship between Ryan and Fleur, but neither of them had ever pressed the matter. And Ryan, for his part, had never owned up to it, until now. As he watched Fleur, a curious thought flitted through Ryan's mind. If this truly was the Mirror Realm, maybe duplicates of them did exist, waiting somewhere as backups, ready for him to test the world's boundaries. The moment the idea formed, an imperceptible ripple pulsed through the air around them, so faint that only Ryan noticed it. In that split second, everything about his perception of Kate and Penelope shifted, as though an unseen force had quietly purified them. Though to Kate and Penelope, nothing seemed to have changed at all. A bruised, inky mist oozed through the mirror realm's surface, and three figures slid into view, only to slump to the ground, fast asleep. High above them, Kate alighted on a slender branch, so light she barely bent it. The treetops quivered in time with her shifting mood. Ryan stifled a grin. "What's so funny just now?" Kate's eyes narrowed. "Don't think I didn't catch that look. What were you plotting?" He shook his head. "You're imagining things, Kate." She pouted, swinging a lock of hair over her shoulder. "Right, but I'm pretty sure you're thinking about Harry's fifth task." He folded his arms. "Okay, fine. You all know about Voldemort's Horcruxes? Yes?" Kate bobbed her head, the branch swaying beneath her. "Go on." "There was Tom Riddle's diary, now in the hands of our Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Riddle himself. Then the Gaunt family ring, with the resurrection stone set in it, still lies hidden in the ruins of the old Gaunt estate. The Hufflepuff cup? It was locked away in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault at Gringotts until Riddle destroyed it. One Horcrux is Harry himself, and the last, Ravenclaw's lost diadem." Ryan paused, and Kate's eyes widened, "was swallowed by the basilisk Jerry in the chamber. The fragments that remained were reclaimed by Harry." Kate sat perfectly still for a moment, breathless. Finally, she whispered, "That makes 5. Harry's going to have to hunt them all down." Both Helena and Harry had assumed it was Ravenclaw craftsmanship. The Slytherin locket, Harry and the rest of us all believed it had been destroyed in the Blacks' boiler room, was actually right here. Before any of us could react, Ryan's voice trailed off. A gray shimmer swept through our 4 bodies, and in the next instant we were standing in a peculiar room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves pressed in on every side, as though we'd stumbled into some hidden library. Yet the pages on every shelf were filled with the same bizarre misprint. Every P was a Q, every A an E, and so on. Ryan pointed down to the wooden floor. "Here it is, Kate, the smith's old study, exactly where Jerry swallowed the locket." We all stared at the faint outline left on the floorboards. This had been the first Horcrux Jerry ever consumed, and perhaps that was why all its magic had simply vanished, leaving nothing but an ordinary piece of metal. No enchantment, no curse, just a locket. Ryan grinned as he crouched beside the spot. From above, Kate's voice snapped. "You little, didn't you warn me before you shifted us?" She stood huddled atop a narrow shelf, cheeks flushed, clearly still off balance. The sudden teleport had twigged her sideways, and she'd had to squat low to avoid bashing her head into the ceiling. Ryan just shrugged, eyes twinkling. "I thought you'd enjoy the surprise." "You could stay hidden in the shadows," Ryan said, "and then slip out by blending into our silhouettes." Kate bristled. "I won't," she insisted. Yet a heartbeat later, she was at Penelope's side, arms crossed and clearly unconvinced. "So," Penelope said, narrowing her eyes at Ryan, "your plan is to transfer whatever residual magic remains here to the Black family's old boiler room, the very spot Harry Potter believed held a Horcrux?" Ryan shook his head. "No, there's nothing left to transfer." He held up a hand and explained calmly. "The Mirror Realm only recently expanded across the globe. All the other Horcruxes, the locket, the diadem, were destroyed long ago, and any soul fragments once in the Hufflepuff cup were absorbed by Riddle himself. There's literally no trace or memory left behind." Penelope's lips curled into a skeptical smile. "So this whole mission, what was the point?" Kate shifted her weight uneasily. "And what about Harry's mission with the resurrection stone? Please tell me it won't end like Harry Potter and the Otherworldly." "After I seized control of time, I didn't simply sit back and do nothing. I recovered the strange artifacts, what you might call magazines, from those destroyed Horcruxes. Those were precisely the materials Harry needs to absorb for his mission. These magazines will bolster the evil half of Harry's fractured soul, the fragment he absorbed long ago, all in the name of balance." Ryan's grin curved into something almost inhuman. "Balance?" Penelope echoed, leaning forward. "What do you mean?" Kate asked, equally intrigued. Fleur, on the other hand, strolled over to a nearby bookshelf, plucked a random volume, and squinted at the upside-down runes. "Yin and yang," Ryan said softly. Light and darkness, the perfect fusion of virtue and sin. He paused, as if weighing his words. If I could manage the resurrection ceremony myself, it would be far less complicated. But Harry Potter must carry out the ritual alone. To succeed, he has to be whole. His darkness must grow in perfect proportion to his love. Ryan's eyes gleamed, like the two poles of a magnet, equal, opposite, neither overpowering the other. Kate frowned. There's no record of such a ritual. It didn't exist, at least not at first. That's precisely why we're here, Ryan replied, his voice low and electric. We're forging something entirely new. I've found that any relics I recover from Voldemort always cling to the spot where they died, Ryan said with a casual wave of his hand. No sooner had he spoken than the enchanted carpet trembled, unleashing a piercing screech. A black, formless shadow burst from the castle's threshold and hurtled into the night sky. Chapter 52, The Wolf Wizard at Hogwarts. Moonlight poured through the tall windows of the astronomy tower, casting long silver shafts across the dust-choked floor. Kate pressed her wand tip against a shifting shadow that clung to the base of a gargoyle's pedestal. The darkness recoiled as if stung. Is this the trace of Voldemort's magic and memories? Kate whispered, astonished. The way the shadow shrieked and shrank at Ryan's approach felt more like a bully's slap than the menace of the Dark Lord himself. Ryan shrugged, in a manner of speaking. Furong tilted her head. Even Harry wouldn't deduce from that wisp that Voldemort actually died here. True, Ryan admitted, but you're forgetting a crucial step. Harry still needs to recite the incantation I taught him, bind it to me in a proper ritual, so I can absorb and process every fragment. Kate frowned. But this residue is so chaotic. How could it remember you, or even know you exist in some parallel world? Ryan tapped his temple. It can't. These echoes are disorganized. They'll latch onto me as the conduit, but they won't gain any self-awareness. They won't realize I'm their so-called opposite world master. A hush fell as the shadow's edges flickered. Penelope crossed her arms. So that's why we dragged Harry back to Hogwarts tonight? To force him into your sideshow? Ryan's lips curved into a mild smile. Exactly. Once Harry completes the chant and channels it through me, every last shard of Voldemort's final memories will flow out. We'll learn what really happened here, maybe even secrets Voldemort thought buried forever. Kate took a steadying breath. Fine. I'd rather wrestle with ghosts than stand around bickering. As they formed a circle around the wavering shadow, the tower seemed to hold its breath. Tonight's ritual would finally unveil the truth behind Voldemort's demise, and nothing would ever be the same. Ryan grinned. Not at all. We still have plenty of ground to cover today. Next stop, the White House, headquarters of the world's most powerful leader. Wizards excluded, of course. Meanwhile, back at the Burrow, Harry's day was finally winding down. It had been the strangest birthday he could remember. After Sirius returned with Regulus, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley slipped out to the garden to feed the chickens, leaving Harry and his friends the run of the house for the first time all day. Harry sank into an armchair. I still can't believe Lupin and the others didn't show up. They just sent their gifts with Sirius. Ron leaned forward, mischief lighting his eyes. You knew? Let me guess. Your friend Wayne again? Harry rolled his eyes toward a corner of the room. That obvious, huh? Draco scowled at Ron. You know, I'm starting to think Lavender's not interested in you at all, but in Campbell. Ginny snorted. Ronald Weasley, a hypocrite and a total jerk. Ever since Ron had teased her about her friendship with Harry, she'd seized every chance to get him back. Ron opened his mouth to reply, but Harry held up a hand. All right, that's enough. Hey! You're impossible, Malfoy. Draco looked up from his book. What now? Ron clenched his fists, eyes flashing. The way you're talking about Wayne, she and I are just friends. Capiche? Draco sighed. Wayne and I are strictly platonic. She fancies that old caretaker Filch, doesn't she? Ron swung his fist in the air. So you'll admit Lavender isn't your girlfriend? Draco arched an eyebrow. Pansy and Lavender only know each other because of me. We even exchange letters on our days off. Otherwise, I'd be happy to set the record straight. Enough, Ron snapped, cutting him off. Draco rolled his eyes. Fine. What do you want me to say to shut you up? Just speak plainly. No more riddles. Ron's harsh expression softened a fraction, and Draco seized the moment. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Those wolf wizards, Wayne and the others, they weren't born with magic, were they? Weren't they squibs at first? Draco nodded. Correct. The ministry stepped in. They appointed Professor Lupin, him small, left a wolf wizard, to teach them and assigned Tonks as an auror liaison to keep the classroom under control. Ron shook his head. Makes sense. There are just too many wolf wizards now to manage without extra supervision. Draco leaned back, satisfied. Exactly. Ron lowered his voice so only Harry could hear. You know how there are squibs who can't go to magic school? Well, Dumbledore has just admitted another group, wizards who were once werewolves but were barred from Hogwarts because of it. Harry frowned. They actually go to Hogwarts now? Right, Ron said, grinning. You remember Professor Campbell saying they went to that school of magic and drama? That was before this decision. Dumbledore overturned the ban against all odds. Harry blinked. So he's letting people who could never attend Hogwarts have a chance now? Exactly. Ron's tone turned almost reverent, and it makes sense with the Triwizard Tournament bringing in professors from all 4 schools. There's enough staff to teach them. Harry shook his head, half in admiration, half in exasperation. Ginny gave a quick nod alongside him. Okay, but where do they live? Harry asked. Not in our dormitories, thank Merlin, Draco muttered. They stay in a magical tent. Ron raised an eyebrow. It's summer. Who'd want to live in a stifling castle? That isn't quite fair, Draco shot back, though his voice trailed off as he noticed a few curious stares from nearby students. We Slytherins once lived at the bottom of the Black Lake. Chilly in winter, sure, but refreshingly cool in summer. He fell silent as several heads turned in his direction, and the conversation moved on without him. Yet despite Draco's protest, Harry and Ron were too intrigued by Dumbledore's latest stroke of goodwill to pay much mind. A few minutes later, as everyone shuffled around to find new seats and continue their conversation, Harry's face suddenly clouded over. There's a problem, he announced, his voice tight. What now? Ron asked, frowning at him. He'd spent the last hour at Harry's side. What else could have gone wrong? Then again, Harry had spent time with Fred and George earlier. Could something have happened then? Harry sighed. I almost completely forgot. Ron's eyebrows shot up. Don't tell me. It's not what you think, Harry snapped, swatting Ron's inquisitive gaze away. Hey, stay away from my boyfriend, Ginny interposed, sliding between them with her arms crossed and a scowl aimed squarely at Ron. From the other side of the table, Draco Malfoy leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the scene. So what's the big secret, Potter? Spill it. Harry ducked his head, running a hand through his hair. It's Neville's birthday, he muttered. I completely forgot. Right, and you're telling us now because... Ron prompted dryly. Harry groaned. Because I just realized there must be a present from him sitting in that pile of gifts at the foot of my bed. I haven't even sent him anything yet. Ron shook his head in mock sympathy. Typical. You owe me a favor when I have to smooth this over with Longbottom. Ginny rolled her eyes, but a gentle smile tugged at her lips. Well, you'd better write a note, at the very least. Neville's expecting you to remember. Harry's shoulders slumped. I'll make it right, I promise. Draco smirked. Glad we cleared that up. For a moment there, I thought Potter had angered someone truly dangerous. Ginny laughed, tugging Harry's hand. Come on, birthday boy. Let's sort this out before Neville's cake melts. With a shared smile, the friends rose from the table, determined to rescue Harry's forgotten obligation, and to make sure Neville's special day didn't go uncelebrated. Harry shifted uncomfortably on the edge of the armchair in the Gryffindor common room. Across from him, Ron lounged on the sofa with a skeptical look, and Ginny perched on the windowsill, arms folded. I can't help it, Harry said, his voice low. Sure you can, Ron replied, raising an eyebrow. Neville's the quietest person in our dormitory. Why? Have you ever even asked him when his birthday is? Ginny shook her head. He's as timid as Anthony, Terry, Michael, or Ryan. None of them make a fuss about birthdays. Exactly, Ron went on. Every birthday you celebrate means another present to buy and another date to remember. Ginny sniffed. I'm not planning to add more to my calendar. Ron's expression softened. But listen, this is different. Neville gave me a gift last week. Harry glanced down at his robes. Right, but I haven't given him anything in return. Did he ever tell you the date? He didn't, Ron admitted. But even if someone's as reclusive as... Well, Voldemort, once they share their birthday with you, it's polite to reciprocate. Ginny smirked. A single nut coin will do, at least. I may have sounded a bit harsh, Ron said, rubbing the back of his neck. If you never knew his birthday, then you're off the hook. Harry ran a hand through his hair, feeling his cheeks warm. Actually, he did mention it, when it was just the two of us in the tower. He said he was born exactly 1 day before me. He looked up, meeting their eyes at last. So yeah, I suppose I do owe him a gift. I'd be happy to help. Could you please paste the full chapter text you'd like me to rewrite into coherent, idiomatic English? Chapter 53, Mission 5 begins. Harry stood among the rows of wilting tentacula in the Hogwarts greenhouse, his gaze fixed on Draco Malfoy. Draco's pale face was unreadable as he repeated the question he'd asked moments ago. Hold on, did someone just bring up that prophecy? Ron, who'd been rummaging through his pockets for an extra quill, looked up blankly. What prophecy? You mentioned it earlier, Draco said, voice cool. The one that's supposed to come to pass at the end of July. Does July 30th count as the end of July or not? Harry closed his eyes for a second, steadying himself. Yes, and the prophecy speaks of someone carrying a mark. Ron's hand froze on his pocket. He glanced down at the scar across his forehead, the very same lightning bolt Harry had carried. His face drained of color. Does Neville have a scar like mine? He blurted. Ginny's eyes flashed with anger. Ron, that wound wasn't just a scar. It was the price of Harry's parents' sacrifice, a subject Harry and Ginny had long since agreed to treat with utmost respect. Harry reached out and gently brushed Ginny's hair from her face, offering her a reassuring look. Before Ron could stammer an apology, Draco sprang forward, covering Ron's mouth with one hand and steering him away from the greenhouse. Ginny's sharp, "What are you doing?" trailed after them, muffled against Draco's coat. Once they'd reached the edge of the moonlit garden, Draco released Ron and gave him a stern look. Ron's eyes darted back toward Harry and Ginny, who were already leaning into each other in tender conversation. In a low whisper, Ron asked, "All right, what's really happening?" Chapter 7, A Harmless Deception. Harry collapsed onto his bed, still catching his breath from the scramble downstairs. Draco stalked into the room, cheeks flushed. "I still have something to say to Harry." Ron, sprawled in the armchair by the window, glanced up in mild annoyance. "Are you off your rocker?" Draco shot him a glare. "I thought you were, taken?" Ron snorted. "Didn't you notice what Harry and Ginny were up to just now?" Draco frowned. "What are you talking about?" Without missing a beat, Ron stuck out both index fingers and tapped them together. "This," he said bluntly. "Merlin's beard, Draco. Finally you catch on." A relieved exhale escaped Draco. So that was it. Harry, nearly suffocating from stress, had come up with a plan, one that required a bit of subterfuge. "I think Harry's idea is brilliant," Draco declared. "A small lie to keep everyone safe. Very Slytherin, very clever." Ron's expression soured. "You're lying." Ginny, perched on the desk with her hair in delightful disarray, tilted her head. In a husky voice, she said, "A lie isn't always a bad thing, Ronald. Sometimes it brings the best results." Draco beamed. "Exactly. It's the perfect cover. Why insist on absolute truth when a little deception does more good than harm?" Ron threw himself back into the chair. "After all this time, this is the best Harry can come up with?" Draco arched an eyebrow. "Have you never lied in your life, Ron?" Ron opened his mouth to defend himself and promptly closed it again. Ginny leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Then tell me, why do you keep blaming Fred and George for slipping Aunt Muriel's portrait under your pillow? You planted it there yourself." She ruffled her tangled hair and added, "Honestly, do you really think it was the twins? They prank me, not you." Ron's cheeks turned pink. He looked from Ginny to Draco, then let out a reluctant chuckle. "Touché." Draco gave him a triumphant grin. "Glad we cleared that up." Ginny hopped off the desk and smoothed her skirt. "All right, boys, enough bickering. Let's get on with Harry's plan." United by purpose and a shared willingness to stretch the truth, they turned their full attention back to Harry, ready to carry out the harmless deception that just might save them all. Harry blinked and rubbed his eyes. For a moment he was sure there were two Rons standing in front of him, only the one who, to just spoken, had longer hair and unusually smooth skin. "I'm not saying the plan's bad," that other Ron went on. intentionally mixing up the date, pretending the party is either a day early or a day late, and sneaking Neville his present tomorrow. It's brilliant. The real Ron pressed in. I still think Harry can come up with something even better. Then he shot a warning glare at Ginny. And for Merlin's sake, let's drop this Aunt Muriel business, shall we? Fine by me, Ginny replied with a teasing smirk. You're a big boy now. No more bedwetting, right? I haven't ever wet the bed, Ron roared. At that, the door creaked open and Mrs. Weasley appeared, hands firmly planted on her hips. Ronald, that's enough. Be civil to your sister. Sorry, Mum, Ron muttered, his cheeks reddening. No sooner had Mrs. Weasley stomped away than Ginny's eyes went wide and her voice dipped into a panicked squeak. Harry, do you think Mum was eavesdropping? Did she just hear you lying? Ginny looked ready to faint, convinced they'd all been overheard. Harry felt himself crumple inward. Ginny's teasing was more painful than a curse. He held up a hand. That's enough, Ginny. Ginny only grinned wider. Honestly, in Mum's eyes, you're the perfect child, Harry. Ron snorted. Even if Mum heard us say that, she'd think we'd corrupted you somehow. I doubt it, Ginny replied with a shrug. How on earth could Mrs. Weasley have overheard? Harry asked, blinking in surprise. She must have been passing by, Ginny said. You were pretty loud. Harry sighed. He'd endured Ron's sour jabs, Harry's mum's favorite, and the like, far too many times. Still, the sting never really went away. Can you imagine Mum having kids as prank-obsessed as Fred and George? Ron and Ginny exchanged amused looks. She was even wilder than they were back at Hogwarts, Ron whispered conspiratorially. They'd barely spoken before both of them paused, ears perking toward the door. Harry blinked at their ridiculous synchronization, then couldn't help but laugh. You two really are impossible. As the afternoon wore on, the trio's conversation circled back to Mrs. Weasley. They recalled her fiery debates with Fred over burnt dinners, her shy blush when Professor Dumbledore praised her homemade scones, and the time she sent a bouquet of magically preserved Mimbulus Mimbletonia blossoms to brighten up Harry's dormitory. Suddenly, Ron propped his elbows on the table and pulled out a roll of parchment. What about Neville? We should send him something special. He's been so homesick. Ginny's eyes lit up. Brilliant idea. Let's order from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Great, Ron said, dipping his quill in ink. Now, how do we actually pay for it? Harry grinned. Online, of course, by owl mail. Ginny shook her head in mock disbelief. Honestly, the world is changing faster than a golden snitch. Subsequent payments will be processed by Gringotts and automatically deducted from my vault. It's brilliant, Draco remarked with a grin. Dusk settled over the Weasley household. Seizing the moment, Draco half-seriously suggested he could just pitch a tent in Harry's bedroom. Harry and Ron were having none of it. Under their firm and heavily implied insistence, plus Mrs. Weasley's equally firm arrangements, Draco found himself settling into the guest room instead. It's unreal, Ron muttered as he stormed off down the corridor. Malfoy of all people, camping out in our guest room. Harry remained behind in the sitting room, sinking into the armchair by the hearth. He reached for his wand, determination in his eyes. Time to make sure we're not caught off guard, he murmured. He then uttered 3 incantations in quick succession, Vestigium Revelio. A web of silvery threads sprang across the doorframe, an invisible alarm that would alert him at the slightest disturbance. Regio Abandonata. The very air in the room shimmered as a subtle Confundus variant took hold, imbuing any intruder with a powerful urge to turn back. Phantasma Custos. A faint, ghostly figure flickered into being above the bed, a silent sentinel ready to deter anyone from coming too close. Satisfied, Harry lowered his wand. Whatever the night might bring, he'd know the moment something, or someone, tried to slip in. Harry paused at the threshold of the empty dormitory, his stomach tightening with anticipation. It felt like standing before a field of barren soil, waiting for a harvest that would never come. But the final spell he was about to cast was as clear in purpose as any planting charm, to conjure a flawless, untouchable double of himself. He drew in a steady breath, flicked his wand, and whispered the last incantation. In an instant, a perfect replica of himself appeared on the bed, hair mussed, robes rumpled, eyes closed in deep slumber. The 2 preparatory spells had been subtle, wards to mask his presence and dampen sounds, neither powerful enough to stop an intruder. This phantom Harry, however, would be irresistible. So long as the visitor wasn't Ron, the ruse should hold. Harry's mind flicked back to the forbidden scrolls he discovered in the Mirror World's Hogwarts library last time he was trapped there. He'd spent weeks committing their rare, complex charms to memory, an obsessive venture no one at Hogwarts could suspect. Now, with all 3 spells finally at his command, he felt ready for the strange 5th task awaiting him. His heart thundered in his chest as he advanced toward the frosted glass window, where the mirror-like surface trembled with hidden power. He braced himself, raised his wand once more, and whispered the final words. The glass rippled like disturbed water, then began to draw him in. Harry's breath caught as he felt the pull at his very soul. With a final, resolute step, he let himself be swallowed by the gleaming portal, and vanished. Chapter 54. The Solid Gate. Darkness enveloped Harry once more, yet within that void countless silver-lit doors shimmered, each silently calling to him. One door in particular, his very first, glided forward, its edges glowing brighter as it drew near. When Harry opened his emerald-green eyes, he found himself standing before a room both familiar and strangely altered. His old bedroom at number 12, Grimmauld Place, the ancestral home of the Black family. Though every piece of furniture was present, the entire layout appeared reversed, as if viewed through a mirror. He reached out and turned the serpent head doorknob, then stepped inside. Instantly, a legion of frost-blue candle flames leapt to life, reflecting off the silver embroidery of his wizard's robe and casting him as a pale, drifting specter. A chill ran down his spine. This shadowy chamber had always felt like a house of horrors. Harry reminded himself that the mirror world was nothing more than a reflection of reality. If here the air was bathed in icy light, then in the waking world, Grimmauld Place must still be lit by the same cold candles. Even the third-floor guest room, far removed from Regulus Black's former quarters, must harbor that same lonely glow he'd awoken to on his birthday yesterday. He could almost hear Sirius's voice, wry and knowing. That frosted luminescence had always belonged to Regulus, a silent testament to the brother Sirius had lost. And now, in this mirrored realm, it reminded Harry of everything he'd left behind, and everything he still carried with him. Harry paused beneath the snake-shaped chandelier, its bronze coils glinting in the pale blue flame of the candelabra beside him. He took a steadying breath and began to descend the narrow, shadowed staircase. Every detail, the wrinkled house-elf heads mounted on the wall, the austere stone banister, felt as familiar to him now as the face in a mirror. Even the umbrella stand, fashioned from a troll's broken leg, struck him as oddly charming. That battered troll leg marked the entrance to the first-floor hallway, leading Harry closer to today's destination, the boiler room, better known as Creature's bedroom. The corridor was cold and cramped, its rough stone walls closing in as he moved forward. Above, a low ceiling groaned under the weight of heavy iron pots and pans, their blackened surfaces dripping wizarding grime. "It really does live up to the name Grimmauld Place," Harry murmured to himself when he finally arrived at the battered wooden door. A chill prickled the back of his neck. Here, the cold, sticky residue of ancient magic was almost tangible. Through a crack in the door, he heard muffled sobs, each one sharper than the last. With a firm grip on the knob, Harry steeled himself to step inside. Harry froze the moment he heard it. Though the door between them was solid wood, the sound pierced through him, and with it came the vision, a makeshift nest of tattered cloth strips, woven together in uneven layers. And inside that nest, writhing and crying, was a naked child. Its skin was bright red and rough, as if someone had peeled it away from bone. Harry's throat went dry. Despite the child's frailty, so small, so clearly injured, he recoiled, every instinct urging him to back away. Yet his feet remained rooted in place, curiosity warring with revulsion. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he reached out. His hand hovered over the cold brass knob of the boiler room door, fingertips trembling. He twisted. He would push it open. Then his courage vanished like mist. He clutched at the doorknob as though it might bite him. Instead of stepping inside, he found himself stepping back. Maybe prayers are enough, he told himself, heart thundering. Seconds later, Harry had released the knob, fallen to his knees in the dim hallway, and pressed his palms together. In the silence, his voice shook as he called out, "Creator of 1,000 stars, master of the otherworld, you who transcend destiny and command divine power, hear me now." He waited, breath caught in his chest. Beyond the door, something small and wounded whimpered, and Harry prayed for the strength to open it. Harry's lips parted, and two identical yet subtly different voices rose in unison. "Those whose destinies mirror yours call out across your realm," they intoned. As the chant unfolded, a vast, radiant consciousness unfurled around him, enveloping him in a peace as comforting as a mother's amniotic waters. The swirling vision sharpened, until suddenly through the door before him, a small, cloth-bound creature gave one terrifying, echoing roar. Yet the door held firm, a natural moat that stopped Harry's next words in their tracks. "The final traces and memories shall awaken in your third vision of fate, reborn." The plea struck the barrier like a misfired bullet and fizzled into silence. In that moment, Harry understood. The spell would only complete if he actually entered the room, or laid a hand on the frightened little being inside. As the last echo of his prayer faded, the sacred presence withdrew, leaving him hollow and stunned. A lonely ache bloomed in his chest, an inexplicable sorrow like that of a bride abandoned at the altar. Harry took a deep breath and grasped the door handle again, yet it would not budge. "How is this possible?" he muttered, frustration tightening his chest. He raised his wand, aimed at the lock, and whispered sharply, "Alohomora!" The metal click of the keyway echoed, but the door remained stubbornly shut. "All right, then." Harry squared his shoulders and tried again. "Alohomora Maxima." Usually that charm would blast a lock clean off its hinges, but this time the mechanism didn't even shudder. Annoyed, he let out an exasperated sigh and barked, "Open sesame!" His voice rang oddly in the corridor, like a muggle thief's incantation, but the door stood firm, as if nailed into the frame. Harry's jaw clenched. He flicked his wand left and right, unleashing a barrage of explosive magic. Fulmin Explosio, Confringo, Confringo. Booming blasts and sizzling firebombs dented the air, but the door itself only bore a faint scorch mark. Now truly desperate, he muttered the words of the darkest curse he knew. "Avada, bite the big melon." A sickly green light flared along the gap, but fizzled out against the door's enchanted surface. He stepped back, panting, and inspected the wood. It looked cleaner than before, stripped of grime and polished to an almost matte finish. Whoever had restored it clearly wove powerful counter-charms into every grain. Not a single unlocking spell, destructive hex, or even the killing curse could penetrate it. Harry let his wand slip from his fingers. His heart pounded with both rage and awe. The door hadn't moved an inch. He inhaled slowly, forcing calm into his racing mind. Brute force had failed. Now he would have to think. Whatever lay beyond this barrier, Harry knew he needed a new strategy, one that relied on cunning rather than pure magic. To be continued. "Got it!" Harry exclaimed as a new idea flickered in his mind. He reached into his robe and pulled out his multifunctional knife, a birthday gift that doubled as a blade, an ear pick, and a nail clipper. He always carried it with him. After all, Fred and George Weasley had shown him how to jimmy a lock using muggle tricks during his stay at the Burrow. Harry eased the slim blade into the narrow gap between the door and its frame, sliding it from top to bottom. Then he yanked the knife free and rammed his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. To his dismay, the intense heat pouring off the other side had already warped the knife's edge. He collapsed to the floor, staring at the unyielding door that hid Creature's bedroom, and the little house elf's muffled sobs. The sounds seemed almost triumphant, as if mocking his failure. Harry shook off his discouragement. There has to be another way, he told himself firmly. This mirror world was a reflection of reality. If Harry couldn't force the door open, maybe Creature could. Or perhaps Sirius had discovered another back door into the room. Drawing a steadying breath, Harry rose to his feet, ready to try Plan B. Whatever lay beyond that door, he was determined to face it. Perhaps this was one of Sirius's new concealment charms, cast back in the boiler room to turn this chamber into a secret vault of his most precious belongings. If Harry's plan failed, he could still send word to Ryan and call for help. Clinging to that last flicker of hope, he stepped toward the iron basin, and before he knew it, his reflection rippled and vanished into the basin's smooth, mirror-like surface. Chapter 55. Successfully Entering the Boiler Room. Harry sat in the dim glow of the Gryffindor common room, his brow furrowed. The door he needed to breach in the mirror world was unlike any he'd ever faced. Its wards were so powerful that not even Avada Kedavra could shatter them. He'd planned to enlist Creature's help and find a way to steer the old house elf's darker instincts, but the finer details still eluded him. Ginny leaned forward from the armchair opposite him, watching his troubled expression. "Harry," she said, "remember that once you enter the mirror world, you can move through any reflective surface, windows, polished pipes, even framed glass. You don't have to force that door. You can slip in through a mirror instead." Harry's eyes brightened. "You mean there might be a flat, reflective surface just outside the boiler room? Something I can step through?" "Exactly. Look for any gleaming brass pipes or a window pane on that corridor wall. As long as it catches your reflection, it's your doorway in." He nodded, picturing the long, torch-lit corridor beneath the castle. "I'll need Creature to lead me there and keep him from turning hostile once we're both inside. But if I can make it through a mirror, I'll bypass every ward on that door." Ginny smiled. "And once you're inside, you can search for whatever's been hidden there, most likely the same treasures you saw stashed in Creature's quarters, although, according to your vision, they weren't there anymore." Harry's mind replayed that unsettling glimpse, the gold chalices and ornate silver candelabras, now gone. Had they been moved down to the boiler room? He pushed the thought aside and focused on the plan. "All right," he said, standing. "Let's find Creature and get to that corridor. I'll locate the best mirror surface, step through, and we'll see what's waiting behind that door. No spells required." He glanced at Ginny, determination shining in his eyes. "Ready?" "Always," she replied. Together, they swept from the common room, ready to slip through glass and into the heart of the castle's secrets. Once Harry's spell had scrubbed the cloth strips perfectly clean, they lay in neat, straight rows on the bench. Problem solved. Now he only needed a gift for Creature. And for a house elf bound to the Black family, what could be more fitting than an old black heirloom mirror? It'd take an entire room to store, but Harry knew there were several locked away in 12 Grimmauld Place. He just had to pick one that suited the family's style. He folded the last strip of cloth and turned to Ginny. "I'm heading over to Sirius's," he announced, shouldering his bag. Ginny looked up, puzzled. "Harry, are you moving back in at Grimmauld Place?" He paused in the doorway, one hand drifting toward the doorknob. "No, well, not permanently. I just need to fetch something for Creature. I'll be back soon." At that moment, Sirius emerged from the kitchen, mug of coffee in hand. "Hold on," he said, setting the mug down. "You're not secretly planning to live here again, are you? And where are Ron and Draco? Last I heard, Draco was at the Burrow." Harry's cheeks warmed. He kicked at the floorboards. "I promise, I'm not moving in. I just need to borrow a mirror. I'll return it tonight." Sirius studied Harry for a moment, then his face broke into a grin. "Fine then," he said. "You two always did have clever or reckless schemes, depending on a house elf to sneak you into places you weren't supposed to go, right? Like that summer when you nearly broke into Hogwarts." Harry couldn't help but smile. "Exactly. Creature can slip us in while the wards are down." Sirius took a satisfied sip of his coffee. "I'll keep an ear out for any whispers from the dining hall. Don't keep me waiting." With a wave, Harry hurried out the door. Ginny watched after him, half amused, half exasperated, as Sirius settled back at the table, already plotting the next adventure. Harry finally relented with a reluctant nod. "Okay, fine. It's a secret between Draco and me, and I'm not telling." Sirius raised an eyebrow. Children deserve their secrets, so long as they don't harm anyone, except perhaps Snotlout. Harry rolled his eyes. "Don't worry, it won't hurt Snotlout. It might upset someone else, though." Sirius's face darkened. "Then be careful." Harry turned to leave. "All right, I'm off." He strode toward the kitchen pantry, only to hear a soft rustle behind him. "Master Harry, do you have any orders?" came a timid voice. Harry paused. "Creature? When did you get here?" The house elf bowed so low his ears nearly touched the stone floor. "As soon as you spoke my name, Master Harry." His beady eyes shone, and the thin white hairs on his bat-like ears trembled with anticipation. Harry was certain that, given a command, Creature would obey it, even if that meant chopping off his own head for display. Creature straightened, hands clasped in front of him. "Name your wish, great Master Harry. Even to teach an ungrateful son a lesson, I stand ready." Harry couldn't help a small laugh. "Very well, show me to my quarters." As they walked down the corridor, Harry glanced at the eager elf. "Oh, and one more thing. Where do you keep your personal treasures?" Creature's grin stretched ear to ear. "Right this way, Master Harry." Creature's brittle voice rasped through the stillness of the drawing room. "These are not Creature's treasures." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Actually, they belong to the Black family, not you." Creature straightened his back, indignation flashing in his beady eyes. "They are the precious heirlooms of the noble Blacks. The prodigal son no longer seeks to destroy them, out of respect for the great Master Regulus." Harry shook his head and waved a hand toward Creature's Spartan quarters down the hall. "Fine, but you don't have to keep them locked away in that gloomy little room. It's a bit dreary." Creature cocked his head, confusion plain on his face. "Dreary?" Creature does not understand. "The great Master Harry has insisted I safeguard these treasures in Creature's private room. It is an honor." "It's lonely," Harry interrupted gently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver mirror engraved with a coiled serpent. "Here, I thought a mirror might brighten the place. You can admire yourself every morning, and it'll liven up the walls." He held it out expectantly. Creature's withered hand hovered over the gift, trembling. Then, as though freed from an ancient lock, Creature swept past Harry, carried the mirror straight to his room, and with a whispered word of magic, opened the once unbreakable door. In a single motion, he hung the mirror beside the portraits of the three Bella sisters, where it caught the lamplight and gleamed. When Creature emerged, his usually grim face was softened by emotion. He bowed low, voice thick. "Creature does not know how to express. The kind and generous Harry Potter has not only rescued poor Master Regulus, but has now bestowed honor upon humble Creature. Creature is forever in the great Master's debt." Harry offered a small, forgiving smile. "You're welcome, Creature." For once the house elf simply beamed. "Nothing. You deserve it. Although you claim to hate Sirius, I have to say you've looked after him very well." Harry bit back an embarrassed smile and pretended he was sincerely offering a gift. Even more mortifying was the thought that he could have simply told Creature to leave the kitchen door to the boiler room ajar until he returned. Instead, he'd insisted on sending an enchanted mirror. Creature will follow Harry Potter's instructions and look in the mirror every day. No, every hour, he'd assured the elf. 10 minutes later, having finally shaken off Creature's effusive thanks, Harry exhaled in relief. He'd lied to Sirius, saying he was back at the Weasleys', but in truth, he'd slipped into a bedroom on the 3rd floor of the Black family home. Now, he stood before the tall, floor-to-ceiling mirror in that room, hope bright in his eyes. Suddenly, the familiar cloak of darkness fell over him. Seconds passed as he fumbled in the blackness until his fingers found the seam of a hidden door set into the wall paneling. He pushed it open. Then his world snapped back into light, and he realized he'd misjudged his footing. With a startled cry, he toppled to the floor. Fortunately, Creature had laid a strip of cloth across the boiler room floor. Harry glanced back with relief, but the next instant, there was no time for gratitude. A darkness more potent than anything Voldemort left behind in his first year washed over him. It was as if he'd sunk into quicksand, every limb heavy, every thought trapped. Sticky, oppressive magic pooled in the air around him. Then the vision swam into focus, hovering just inches from his face. The Creature's red skin was gone, peeled back to reveal raw muscle and sinew. Harry could see every gruesome detail as though it were carved into his mind. The little beast lay utterly still, its only response a faint, pitiful whine. A surge of magic from inside Harry, centered painfully at his forehead, reached out and tangled with the Creature's own dark aura. Pressure built behind his eyes, and he felt certain his skull would explode. Yet amid the crushing agony, one thing remained unchanged. Like that trapped, whimpering monster, his mouth could still move. "In your third vision of fate's discovery," intoned the incantation, "the vestiges and memories of the Starforger shall awaken and be reborn." No sooner had the final words faded than a torrent of seething magic, hot as molten rock, surged into the chamber. It wrapped around Harry and the small creature at his side, drowning them both in its infernal glow. Agony tore through him like 1,000 blades. His muscles spasmed, his breath caught, and every nerve screamed. The room spun. Pain blurred his vision until all he could perceive was an impenetrable void. Then darkness. Chapter 56, Red Beast Face. Merlin's beard! Harry gasped, bolting upright in the boiler room. His heart pounded so fiercely he could taste it on his tongue. In his hand he still clutched the small mirror he'd entrusted to Creature. Now, as he stared at his own reflection, the face staring back was scarcely recognizable. The right side was his, pale skin, faint freckles, that familiar hazel eye. But the left side had become something monstrous. The skin was red and scaly, like a burned hide, and his left eye had turned an opaque, ink-black orb, deeper than any wizarding dark brown, as if someone had ground a perfect ebony ink stick into a liquid and slid it in his socket. A surge of fractured memories crashed through his mind. He saw a tall, dark-skinned woman with heavy-lidded eyes, her voice a sultry whisper as they tangled together in hidden bushes. He remembered the creaking boards of a makeshift treehouse where they'd kissed for hours, the thrill of their secret rendezvous on deserted streets. Then the vision flickered to a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and drooping lids, cold, calculating eyes beneath heavy brows. Just as quickly, those intimate images curdled into something far darker. Vivid streaks of green light arcing through shadowed corridors, each blast followed by a sharp crack and a muffled scream. His own name, or was it another's, echoed in the air as terrified voices rose and fell in desperate terror. Harry's breath came in ragged gasps. Was this a dream, a memory, or some new curse playing tricks on his mind? He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. Whatever this was, it had left half his face a raging red, his eye an abyssal void, and filled his head with secrets he'd never asked to know. He forced his trembling hand to grip the edge of the mirror. He had to find Creature. He had to know how this happened before any more nightmares spilled into waking life. Harry's stomach turned at the scene before him. In these stolen memories, Voldemort cast himself as the hero, and even more revolting, he developed an unmistakable fondness for a dark-skinned woman. Harry's gaze drifted to the corner of the room, where Creature's rescued treasures lay neatly arranged. Among them gleamed several silver photo frames, portraits of Bellatrix Lestrange. At first, Harry hadn't recognized her. The Bellatrix in his mind was older, fiercely proud and untouchable. But the woman in those pictures looked different. Her proud veneer was gone, replaced by soft, brown eyes brimming with a deep, almost tender affection. It was as though these memories, these Horcruxes, were proof of Voldemort's own twisted love for her. Harry swallowed bile at the thought. Even more disturbing was the realization of who else appeared in those scenes, the square-jawed man whose face he'd never consciously seen before. In the fragments he'd relived, Voldemort took pleasure in claiming other people's treasures and their bodies. And only one person could have inspired that intensity of feeling for Bellatrix Lestrange, Rodolphus, her husband. Heart pounding, Harry forced his thoughts to stillness. He closed his eyes, exhaled, and let the echo of those memories fade into silence. When he opened them again, he was ready to face whatever came next. Task 6 blinked onto Harry's retinal display. Face the remaining memories and digest them. Note, digest, not master. Act, don't excavate. Always remember you are merely playing a role. When the redness fades, the task is complete. Harry let out a long breath of relief. Not only had he finished Task 5, but he'd also realized something else. That twisted scar across the left side of his face only appeared in his own reflection. Once he digested these final memories, his face would be restored. Of course, that meant he'd have to inspect himself in every mirror until the job was done. He smiled at the thought of Creature's outraged face and slipped his hand into the looking-glass. Darkness swallowed him. Time passed in a blur. Ginny's birthday came and went, and Harry's waking hours fee lit heavier than ever. Nightly he was thrust into Voldemort's mind, raging, entangled with Bellatrix, trailing destruction across the world. He'd snap awake sometimes, heart pounding, caught in a daze. And every dawn, without fail, Ginny stirred beside him, her cheeks flushed as she curled into his arms, wondering what haunted him in his sleep. He could hardly recognize himself anymore. The vile memories he'd absorbed in the mirror world had reshaped him utterly. Spells he once struggled with, poison curses, the darkest of black magic, now bent to his will without effort. In one terrifying display, fully possessed by those remembrances, he unleashed fiendfire on London and watched the city burn to ash. Fiendfire is said to be the most dreadful of magical fires. It grows ever more ferocious as it devours, taking on monstrous shapes that pursue anything combustible, friend or foe alike. Attempts to douse it with water are futile. In Fiendfire's maleficent eye, even water becomes fuel. Only a phoenix stands immune, its very nature a flame unscathed by fire, and as if transformed into one of those mythical birds, he walked through the blaze without a mark. Those memories were more than recollections. They were a conduit for power, a twisted inheritance that made him feel as unstoppable as Voldemort in his prime. When the haze finally lifted, he discovered another change. Most of the red scales that had once marred the left side of his face had fallen away, as though shed by the ferocity of his newfound strength. His cheek, down to his chin, had finally returned to normal skin. That last act of destruction had been his most convincing performance yet. Over the past few days, Harry pieced together the pattern. Every scale he shed corresponded to how closely his behavior mirrored Voldemort's memories. And those memories fell neatly into three categories: intimacy, destruction, and outright killing, each removing more scales than the last. When he shared a tender moment with Ginny, only a few scales fell away, though that may also have been because their bond hadn't reached its deepest level. In the mirror world, Harry could carry out acts of destruction at will, but after so many repetitions, he found himself pulled out of the frenzy by a nagging sense that it was all just an illusion. Gradually, his scale loss slowed. He'd never attempted the final, lethal act, partly because he had a hunch that killing a wizard for real would strip every last scale from his face, and he wasn't prepared to commit that ultimate atrocity. To be continued. Harry's mind kept drifting back to the words in those secret notes. He wasn't truly Voldemort, only an actor playing a role. If murdering someone was the price of bringing his mother back, he'd rather call the whole thing off. And yet, the strange scales that had begun falling from him, an unforeseen effect of his bond with Ginny, of treating her like Bella and himself like the Dark Lord, just kept shedding away. It was obvious now that it was his genuine love for Ginny, not dark magic, that was fueling the change. If he let it go any further, Harry? Hey, snap out of it! Ron's hand on his shoulder yanked Harry back to the present. They were tucked into a quiet nook at Flourish and Blots, but Harry had been staring at Ginny from across the room. "What were you daydreaming about?" Ron asked, half amused, half exasperated. "He's still outside," Draco murmured as he sidled up next to them. "If you want, we can head back to the castle. Your room, I mean." Ginny stood a few paces away, her fingertips nervously tapping together. The flush in her cheeks matched the fiery red of her hair. "Is that really how you see me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Harry exhaled in frustration and rolled his eyes. "Yes," he blurted out before he could think better of it. "Yeah," Ron and Draco chimed in at once. The three voices blended in surprised unison. Harry couldn't deny it. Everyone was noticing how much he'd changed lately. He never passed up a chance to get close to Ginny. He seemed practically glued to her side. Chapter 57. Muscular Neville Harry's frustration was reaching its breaking point. What would any parent do if their child spent all day making out with someone in front of them? Mrs. Weasley, of course, would have been thrilled by such youthful romance, but for Harry, it was mortifying. He kept imagining Bill's voice in his head. "You let her do that? Didn't you step in? Aren't you worried about your family's reputation?" Even more maddening was the question of who was really in charge. Harry sometimes wondered if he was bullying Ginny or if Ginny was bullying him. After all, when he woke up that morning, he'd found unmistakable evidence of her lingering touch on his body. And now, here he was in Flourish and Blots, smack in the middle of Diagon Alley's busiest shopping day. The streets were flooded with Hogwarts students eager to buy their textbooks. Ginny and her friends gave Harry no quarter, no glance of recognition, no courtesy reserved for a fellow Gryffindor. Any passerby who didn't know them might have assumed the worst, that Harry was some ruffian forcing himself on an unsuspecting girl, only to be dragged off by an outraged friend. Thankfully, none of his acquaintances were around to witness the scene, or else Harry's reputation would have been in ruins. Harry, What in Merlin's name are you going on about? A hand the size of a palm leaf fan landed firmly on his shoulder. Harry turned, and for an instant the anger melted from his face as he saw Hagrid's familiar, kindly grin. Hagrid's hand loomed before them, as big as a fan, its huge palm inviting and familiar. There was no mistaking him. And yet it was the figure beside him that truly stopped everyone in their tracks. Neville Longbottom. At first glance, Neville's round, unassuming face seemed exactly as it had last term. But the slim boy they remembered had been replaced by someone almost unrecognizable. Beneath that gentle visage was a towering, burly body, thick arms, powerful legs, coiled muscles, all somehow looking both awkward and undeniably strong, like a dragon dreaming of flight. "Are you Neville?" Ron whispered, disbelief lacing every word. He sounded as if he'd just woken from a nightmare. Draco, or Drake, as a few still called him, gaped in stunned silence, and Ginny shrank behind Harry, peeking out with one wide eye. Neville caught their reactions and let out a small, proud laugh. "Shocked?" Ron's jaw dropped. Yes. I mean, you look massive." Neville straightened his broad shoulders and pressed out his chest. "I've gotten used to it," he said. "Grandma says I'm the spitting image of our family hero, Frank Longbottom, strong, noble, and more than capable of handling myself. She even trusted me to go shopping alone today." He cast them an amused look. "Honestly, you lot look more like Dudley Dursley at a feast than Hogwarts students." A ripple of relieved laughter passed through the group. Neville folded his arms and beamed, every inch the confident young wizard they'd never expected, yet were all too proud to call a friend. "Hold on, so you were struck by some bizarre, vicious curse and managed to turn it into a blessing?" Ron blurted out as he shook off his surprise. Even half of what Neville had now, a rock-solid body capable of that massive palm, would be more than he could ask for. "Ron!" Harry, Ginny, and Draco all exclaimed in unison. Neville waved his hand, brushing off their rebuke with a grin. "Seriously, it's fine. As his roommate, I've grown accustomed to Ron's enthusiasm." He turned to the others. "Besides, I haven't properly thanked you for the gifts. They've been incredibly useful." With a casual flick of his wrist, the air around Neville's hand buzzed in an exaggerated whir. Ron swallowed as he pictured that enormous palm, easily the size of a fan, swinging down and crushing him. Harry stepped forward, offering a conciliatory smile. "We should apologize. We all forgot your birthday." Neville inclined his head. "Honestly, that's on me. I only ever mentioned it to you, Harry. No wonder everyone else missed it." He shifted his gaze back to Ron, his expression matter of fact. "And just so we're clear, there was no curse." "Check out my progress," Neville said, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a firm, well-defined bicep. "All this didn't come from magic. I've been training hard." He flexed and launched into a proud account of every extra rep and late-night workout. But Harry and the others merely offered polite smiles, and Neville's audience quickly dwindled. He cleared his throat and changed tack. "Anyway, have you all gotten your textbooks yet?" With that, Neville drew a battered copy of the Monster Book of Monsters from his satchel. Its cover writhed and snapped its jagged teeth at the air. Steeling himself, Neville wrapped his gloved hand around the creature's spine and forced it shut. "These books for care of magical creatures are brilliant training tools," he said. "Much more interactive than last year's readings." When Harry and Hermione still didn't respond, Neville glanced toward the counter and called, "Excuse me, sir. Could you give me a hand here?" At once, the exhausted, disheveled shopkeeper appeared beside them, tears gleaming in his eyes. His robes hung in tatters, and dark bruises spotted his arms and face, testimony to the day's chaos. He leaned heavily on a stout cane, but managed a grateful smile. "Please," he begged, voice trembling, "if you'll help me wrangle these little monsters, I'll treat your friend to a free meal at the Three Broomsticks." "I'll handle it," Neville announced, stepping forward. As for waiving the fee, the bookstore manager began, glancing at Harry and the others. Ron was about to accept on Neville's behalf when Ginny gave his sleeve a firm tug, warning him off. Harry and Draco both shook their heads politely. "No need to waive the charge," Neville said firmly. "I'm a Hogwarts student, and it's my responsibility to make sure my classmates get their books as soon as possible." The manager's relief was palpable. He bowed so deeply, he nearly hit his forehead on the counter. "After you, Mr. Longbottom," he stammered. Neville rolled up his sleeves and approached the massive iron cage that dominated the center of the shop. Inside, dozens of large emerald-green tomes shifted menacingly, their pages rustling like snarling beasts. To most onlookers, these were the most fearsome volumes in existence, practically untamable. But in Neville's hands, they became docile. He traced a series of gentle hand movements, a light wave here, a delicate tap there, and then cracked his knuckles as if loosening stiff joints. With each subtle gesture, the book's rustling stilled. One by one, they settled into perfect, obedient piles, their cover snarls softening until they lay silent and harmless. Ron let out a low whistle. If there were a jousting match for knights at this ministry-sponsored championship, Neville and Dudley would be unbeatable. Ginny cleared her throat, her eyes urging him on. Ron glanced at Harry, then brightened. "I almost forgot." The late afternoon sun shone brightly over the Hogwarts Quidditch grounds as Harry and Ron walked toward the practice pitch. Ron couldn't hide the admiration in his voice. "Harry, you're not ordinary," he said, patting Harry on the shoulder. "Seriously, anyone who saw you just standing there would never guess how much power you're hiding under that skinny frame." Harry grinned. "It's nothing. I just have better reflexes than most people." Ron shook his head. "Better reflexes, sure, but don't sell yourself short. When it comes to raw strength, you still can't match Neville." Harry shrugged. "And Dudley? He's not exactly Mr. Muscles either. His real edge is his gravity magic. You can't knock him off balance with a straight punch. His enchantments keep him planted like a rock." "Gravity magic?" Ron echoed. "Exactly. And I've got smoke bombs on me too," Harry continued. "When bludgers come hurtling at you and you can't dodge in time, you can drop one of those bombs, cloud the air, and either bat them away or just shield yourself until they slow down." Ron laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Smoke bombs and gravity charms. Who even thinks of that? And Dudley as a goalkeeper." Harry's eyes gleamed. "He's amazing, honestly. I've never seen anyone block bludgers like he can. Word is he's related to me somehow. Must run in the family." Before Ron could respond, a voice cut through the afternoon calm, thick with an unfamiliar accent. "Incredible. Absolutely incredible." Harry turned. Standing just beyond the boundary ropes was a tall, broad-shouldered young man with dark hair and intense gray eyes. His robes bore the emblem of the Bulgarian national team. "Krum. Victor Krum?" Harry breathed. Ron's voice trembled, half awe, half panic. "How does he know us?" Victor Krum smiled faintly. "I came to see if the rumors were true. Hogwarts has a new star, and you, Harry Potter, you and your teammate with the remarkable gravity magic. I had to see for myself." As the Bulgarian champion strode across the grass toward them, Harry felt a thrill of excitement and a rising certainty that this practice session would become far more than just another day of training. Chapter 58. Krum Victor Krum was the Bulgarian national team's star seeker and the undisputed ace of the Quidditch World Cup, and he was only 17. Already celebrated across Europe for his uncanny reflexes and dogged determination, he carried another, more surprising reputation. He was an ardent Chudley Cannon's supporter. In fact, the only opposing seeker he ever truly admired was Ron Weasley. And yet Ron had never bothered to show Harry a single picture of Krum or describe him in detail. Perhaps because Harry's own talent outshone even Krum's, or simply because, as Harry's friend, Ron felt he couldn't lavish praise on a rival. Now, Harry found himself standing just a few feet from that legendary seeker. When Krum finally looked up, he nodded once and said, "You flatter me. Hello, are you really only 17? Harry opened his mouth to reply, but stopped short. Victor's face was almost statuesque, so still and unreadable that Harry had half expected a mask. The only movements were a slow blink and an occasional slight frown. Krum's lean frame, grayish-yellow complexion, and prominent hooked nose, eerily reminiscent of Professor Snape's, gave him an almost predatory look, as if framed by two thick, dark eyebrows that might lift at any moment to reveal a hawk's piercing gaze. It was hard to believe someone who looked so solemn and severe could be anything other than a hardened veteran, let alone just 17 years old. Ron's voice trembled with disapproval as he called out, "Harry, what are you doing standing out here?" Ginny shot her brother a fierce glare. "He even looks older than us," she muttered, clearly annoyed. Over on the sidelines, Draco Malfoy leaned against a pillar, watching the scene with a smirk of amused superiority. Breaking the tension, Victor Crumb strode forward. "Hello," he said in his deep accent, flashing a polite smile at Harry. "I hope you're not too upset with me." Harry rolled his eyes. "I do look mature," he quipped with a shrug. "One of my advantages." Crumb chuckled softly. He reached into his coat, pulled out a photograph of himself, and handed it to Ron, already neatly signed in ink. The moment Ron accepted it, his frown vanished. Ginny's glare softened, and all thoughts of complaining about Harry evaporated as Ron examined the keepsake. Draco stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You're from Durmstrang, aren't you?" he said, the question dripping with suspicion. In Draco's mind, Crumb's friendliness was a thinly veiled ploy, a way to get close to Hogwarts' star player, discover his vulnerabilities, and exploit them in the Triwizard Tournament. Watching Ron beam over the autograph, Malfoy spat on the grass and vowed inwardly, "If anyone's going to protect Harry Potter, it's me." Crumb studied Draco Malfoy with quiet curiosity. The young wizard's handsome features were creased in frustration, and something about his posture suggested he wasn't pleased. Finally, Crumb leaned forward and asked, "Tell me, Draco, are you unhappy with Durmstrang?" Before Draco could answer, a red-haired boy bounced in between them. "Actually, that's Draco Malfoy," he said proudly. "He applied to Durmstrang once, but got turned down." He stepped back, raising a hand. "I'm Ron Weasley." Draco's eyes darted from Crumb to Ron, and he hesitated. Admitting the real reason, that his mother couldn't bear to have him so far away, felt far too embarrassing. Instead, he managed, "You're lucky to be at Hogwarts, Ron." Crumb frowned thoughtfully. "I always thought Durmstrang was already a bit unruly, but I didn't expect it to be that bad." Ron blinked in surprise. "You weren't annoyed just now?" Crumb pressed his fingertips to his jaw, as if smoothing out the lines on his face. Then he gave a wry smile. "That's exactly my problem. My face lies. It hides what I really feel, and the lack of wrinkles masks my age. It's my best trick for keeping everyone guessing." He let out a soft chuckle, though the crease between his brows only deepened. Ginny glanced at Victor Krum in genuine puzzlement. "Then why do you hate Durmstrang? Don't you go there yourself?" She shook her head. "I just don't understand how someone could despise their own school." Krum winced, as if surprised by the question. He paused, staring out the window of Flourish and Blots, where the bustle of Diagon Alley spilled in through the doorway. "Tell you what," he said after a moment. "Why don't I buy you a drink and explain?" Ginny blinked. "Sure, if you like." She folded her arms and watched him warily. Crumb's dark eyes softened as he gazed out at the riot of wizards and witches hurrying by. "I've never seen anything like Diagon Alley before. Honestly, it's incredible." Ginny raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you here to buy your books, though?" Crumb shrugged. "Most foreign students just pick up their Hogwarts textbooks from Flourish and Blots, but everyone's always in such a rush, you don't get to enjoy it." At that moment, Harry cleared his throat. "Last time I saw you, you were flirting with that Bobon's witch, weren't you?" Ginny shot Harry a withering look, and he hurried to clarify. "I mean, well, she was buying books here, too." Ron waved a hand at the crowded shelves. "If you need a guide, I can show you around Diagon Alley blindfolded. I know this place like the back of my hand." Draco Malfoy stood a few paces away, his alabaster face drawn and his gray eyes narrowing as he watched Crumb. Of course, first Crumb piqued everyone's curiosity, then he lavished them with sweets, and now he was singing praises of the greatest gem of the British wizarding world, Diagon Alley. What a subtle, devious ploy. Draco's jaw tightened. He would not let Crumb's charm offensive go unchallenged. "You can buy the book any time," Ron said, nudging Harry with an encouraging grin. "I've got a lot to say right now," Ginny replied, folding her arms, and that means I need a serious amount of ice cream." "Got it," Ron exclaimed. "Florin's ice cream parlor, prison cell decor and all, right?" Crumb's eyes lit up. "I like their prison style, too." Harry shook his head with a faint smile. "Thanks, Ron, but I think we can manage without your guidance this time." Ron's face fell, then brightened again at the thought that his hero had actually listened. Draco, meanwhile, turned his head in disgust, and Ginny shot Harry a look that said, "I can't even watch this." "All right," Harry said, glancing toward the empty cashier's window in the iron cage. "Neville, join us at Florin's. We'll save you a seat." A broad hand shot up from the back of the queue for the Monster Book of Monsters. Neville nodded eagerly. He'd heard every word. 10 minutes later, the group was gathered inside Florin's sparkling, crystal-walled parlor. Crumb loomed over his bowl of triple fudge sundae, scooping in massive mouthfuls as he regaled Harry and the others with stories about the next Care of Magical Creatures class. Harry and Ginny shared a strawberry swirl cone, Ron indulged in Rocky Road, and Draco, reluctantly, nibbled at a plain vanilla scoop. Neville slid into the last empty chair, joyfully brushing melting drips from his robes. The chatter echoed off the crystal walls as they savored their ice cream and the sweet promise of the term ahead. Before that man arrived at Durmstrang, Igor Karkaroff was our headmaster. He was the kind of fellow who fancied himself above it all, more interested in stroking the white fur of his robes than in the needs of the school. All day long, he'd sit locked in his office, barking orders through the door, but never daring to step into the common rooms where real work happened. Of course, he never treated me like the other students. My fame went to my head, and he made sure I got preferential treatment, while the rest of us fumed at how he looked down on everyone else. Then, just last year, something changed. Technically, the headmaster's office still bore the name Karkaroff on the door, but the man behind it was entirely different. A new face, a new style, yet the same title. Durmstrang's traditions run deep. Titles last, people don't. Crumb sighed and reached for his ice cream. He'd rely taken 3 bites when he realized the cup was empty. Waving over the server, he said, "I'll have another scoop of blueberry orange jam, please." He glanced around with a wry smile. "I just sent my parents off to the station this morning, so I've been on the run all day. There's one more chapter to come. I'm deep in code at the moment. And a quick thank you to Taisha Yumiksu for the monthly ticket, and to all of you for the recommendations and subscriptions." Author's note: thanks for reading. The next chapter will be up soon. Chapter 502, The Strange Crumb and the Dark Wizard Potion. Harry had never seen anyone so inconsistent. Take Professor Snape. Even when Harry caught him off guard with a well-placed punch, Snape would still answer with that signature venomous wit. But Victor Crumb, stoic and taciturn just moments ago, suddenly turned into a loquacious chatterbox the instant an ice cream cone touched his lips. He discussed Quidditch tactics, Bulgarian legends, and even debated the merits of different flavor combinations with surprising enthusiasm. Then, as soon as the cone was empty, Crumb reverted to the same shy, distant demeanor he'd worn when they first met. Harry frowned. It was as if 2 different people shared the same body, a phenomenon both bizarre and, frankly, exasperating. Nearby, Draco Malfoy had leaned in so far that he nearly toppled off his stool, quill ready and parchment unrolled to capture every one of Crumb's newfound insights. But just as Draco lifted his quill, Crumb fell silent again. The young Malfoy's pen hovered helplessly in midair. Harry glanced at the shop owner, Florin, who was polishing a row of crystal jars behind the counter. Surely Florin would offer another ice cream to coax Crumb into speech, but no scoop was forthcoming. Instead, Crumb simply stared at Harry and Draco, his expression a perfect poker face. No hint of curiosity, amusement, or irritation. Nothing. Draco huffed under his breath. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Completely ridiculous." Harry allowed himself a small, wry smile. "Welcome to Victor Crumb's world," he whispered back. He suspected they'd seen only one side of the Bulgarian star, and that the other, silent half, was just as powerful in its own way. And while the mystery of the dark wizard potion on the counter still beckoned, its contents shimmering like liquid night, their attention remained fixed on the enigma before them. Because when Victor Crumb spoke, it was extraordinary, and when he didn't, well, that was equally unforgettable. "Why do you think he's such a schemer?" Ron asked, folding his arms. "With someone like Victor Crumb, it would make more sense if he just ordered another few scoops of ice cream and slipped out before we could pick up the tab." At his words, Crumb's dark eyes fixed on Ron, and the older boy felt a thrill run through him. He'd never felt so noticed. No, not even the first time he kissed Lavender. In fact, Ron's gaze grew more and more unbalanced, a hot mix of awe and something else he didn't want to name. Ginny, sitting next to Harry, kept pinching herself and glancing over, cheeks blazing with embarrassment. No matter how odd Victor's behavior got, she was more mortified than anything else. Meanwhile, Victor Krum, the distant, untouchable Quidditch champion, was undergoing a crisis of his own. The boy across from him, who claimed to be his biggest fan, stared with such unblinking intensity that Victor felt his heart pound. To make matters worse, he'd once skimmed an old copy of the Daily Prophet, looking into Harry Potter's fame, and in that moment realized something astonishing. Merlin's beard. This fan was Ron Weasley, and Ron Weasley was gay. Victor forced himself to remain calm, smoothing the expression on his face. "Hey, here comes your ice cream," Mr. Florin announced cheerfully. With a flick of his wand, 2 bowls of freshly churned blueberry preserve ice cream floated across the table and settled in front of Krum. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. Everyone, that is, except Ron, whose wide eyes didn't belie his racing heart. "Who is this person you're talking about, Krum?" Harry asked, leaning forward. Krum paused mid-bite, the cold sweetness of his ice cream doing little to thaw the chill in his voice. Harry's question jolted him back from his rant about Durmstrang. He'd been so worked up that even if Ron stripped down and did a ballet, he probably wouldn't have noticed. "He goes by Grindelwald," Krum said quietly. He swallowed, staring at the melting ice cream. "He slaughtered countless people in Bulgaria. My grandfather was one of his victims." Harry frowned. "But Grindelwald never wielded much power here in Britain. Everyone says he's terrified of Dumbledore." "That's what they always say," Krum snapped. "Look where it got him in the end." "But the Triwizard Tournament is coming up." Krum shook his head, eyes distant. "I was wrong. I saw him and Dumbledore locked in a passionate embrace with my own eyes." Harry blinked. Even though Dumbledore looked repulsed, he still accepted him? He accepted him. Krum repeated, his voice breaking. Harry swallowed hard. "But Dumbledore is the greatest white wizard alive, the only man Grindelwald supposedly fears." Krum's voice cracked. "If even he can't, or won't, stand against Grindelwald, who can?" His composure shattered. Krum waved at the ice cream stand manager. "Another one, please. The same as before." Tears glistened in his eyes as he turned back to Harry. Silence fell over the group as they exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to comfort their friend. Everyone feared the moment those words reached Krum's ears. Dumbledore had been orchestrating all of this for a far greater good, to destroy Voldemort. They knew his expression would shift the instant he grasped the truth. Then, before anyone could blink, Neville Longbottom burst forward, chest thrust out like a banner in the wind. "Harry, I'm here," he declared, and the assembled faces broke into relieved, admiring smiles. Their hero had at last arrived. Far above Castle Smith, 10,000 meters up, Ryan reclined on a wispy cloud, one arm propped behind his head. In his free hand, he cradled an ice-cold 1993 vintage Coke. Half-closed eyes fixed on a dog-eared scroll, he read aloud in a lazy drawl, "Sequence 9 Magic Potion, Dark Wizard." Any who imbibe this brew gain an uncanny aptitude for the dark arts, their minds naturally attuned to curses, hexes, and jinxes. They master venomous spells with ease and can learn any form of black magic at will. No barrier stands before them. He snapped the scroll shut with a snap of his wrist. From behind him, a little girl with glossy black hair and porcelain features popped her head into view. "What are you talking about, you little devil?" she demanded, arching an eyebrow. "There's no such potion in existence." That was Kate. Below them, Fleur Delacour and Penelope Parkin had politely declined Ryan's invitation to join this high-altitude party. Only Kate had dared to follow him into the clouds, just as Ryan had quietly expected she would. He took a proud sip of Coke, plucked an ice cube from his glass, and bit into it. "Weren't you just reviewing this? What's the primary ingredient for this potion?" Kate frowned and tapped the heavy dragon-hide tome she'd set aside. "The dark shadow from the mirror realm?" "Bingo." Ryan snapped his fingers, and the nearby sea of clouds churned, forming a perfect circular window in the sky. Through it, the moment after Harry collapsed in the boiler room played out in vivid detail. The once invisible sea of magic ignited into scorching red magma, erupting from the boiler in a furious cascade. The unconscious Harry and the crimson-skinned child drifted like tiny boats on the molten tide. Harry's lightning-shaped scar, once pale, now glowed a fierce red, as though drawing heat from the surrounding magma. Then, with a sharp crack, the scar split open. Jagged white fangs sprouted from its corners. Any trace of bone or brain vanished, replaced by a blood-red tongue that flicked between the teeth. Below, the crimson child dissolved into the boiling sea as effortlessly as ice in boiling water. The red glow of the magma in the boiler room pulsed and shifted until it took on the deep green hue of moss. The little red creature that had been crawling across the molten rock began to dissolve into the living carpet, its muffled gurgles bubbling upward and then vanishing. At that moment, Harry Potter's forehead began to move. A bloody, toothy maw cracked open, revealing jagged fangs and a long, slick tongue. Wisps of emerald liquid curled toward the wound, drawn into the cavernous mouth. As the last of the green ooze was swallowed, the fangs and tongue retracted, the flesh knitting itself back together until only a single searing scar remained. Apart from that mark, and the faint scent of sulfur, the boiler and its roaring fire were untouched. Ryan waved his hand, and the swirling ring of clouds closed in on their vision, erasing the scene. Kate, heart-pounding, took a careful sip of her vintage '93 Coke, trying to calm herself. Magma plus that little red monster. That was the dark wizard potion you mentioned? She asked, voice unsteady. Ryan smirked. I thought you were more worried about the mouth on Harry's forehead. Kate frowned. He rolled his eyes. There's the fake brew, which you make with herbs, insect carcasses, animal livers, cauldrons, wands, the whole shebang. Then there's the real thing. It's an organic evolution of magic, guided by memory and emotion. He tapped his temple lightly. And that scar on Potter's forehead, it isn't just a scar. It's a brand Voldemort left behind, his mark on the Chosen One. Kate flopped back onto the floor and used the black, dragon-hide grimoire as a pillow. Honestly, I'd be amazed if it didn't just flap around like some bizarre excretory organ stuck to a person, she muttered, echoing Ryan's earlier exaggeration. She rolled onto her back, propped the book beneath her head, and went on. Besides, your trick can't be passed on. I seriously doubt anyone else could ever pull it off the way you do. She folded her arms across her chest and pouted, the corners of her mouth jutting out in mock indignation. Chapter 60. Before setting out, Ryan leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied grin playing on his lips. Around him, the laboratory was bathed in flickering torchlight, its walls draped in heavy black velvet. Wax-coated skulls lined the shelves alongside jars of strange reagents. Everything perfectly gothic, just the way he knew Kate would appreciate. Honestly, I thought you'd think it was cool, he said, stepping forward. Don't you love how gothic it looks? It's almost identical to your second-favorite vampire costume. Kate crossed her arms, her dark eyes assessing him. She glanced at the centerpiece of his display. Harry, slumped against the wall, his features grotesquely distorted by the latest potion Ryan had concocted. His skin was sallow, his limbs too long, his teeth sharpened into fangs, precisely the monstrous creature Kate spent hours hunting in her favorite video game. Ryan watched her, expecting her to leap into action, brandish a silver sword and shout, "Off with his head!" Instead, Kate merely tapped her chin, as if weighing the potion's commercial potential. He frowned. Well, aren't you going to say anything? I'm 17, she replied coolly. Do you still see me as a little kid? Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew she hated being treated like a child, and yet whenever he teased her, she fired back exactly like this. He raised an eyebrow, and a teasing smirk spread across his face. Kate looked down at her own hands, small, delicate, almost childlike. Something clicked in her mind. Despite her age, despite the sharpness of her spirit and the skills she'd honed over years of monster slaying, her appearance betrayed her. She let out a soft sigh. Ryan's smile softened. Okay, he said quietly, pushing aside a jar of dusky potion. No more kiddie stuff. Informal, full participation. Fair enough? Kate met his gaze, a small, wry smile tugging at her lips. Fair enough. Now, tell me about this potion, because if Harry can turn into my favorite boss monster, that could change everything we do. Ryan's grin widened. That's the spirit. Together, they turned back to Harry and the Gothic laboratory around them, ready to make their final preparations before heading out into the night. Ryan cleared his throat and adopted an air of exaggerated seriousness. Shall we talk about something more adult? Kate rolled her eyes. You little brat. When you mentioned that potion, I noticed it was labeled Sequence 9. Let me guess, Sequence 9 is the most powerful, then comes 8, 7, all the way down to 1? She leaned forward, a teasing glint in her eye. And the names must correspond to the worst criminals, petty thieves at the bottom, dark wizards like, up at the top. For a moment, Ryan looked genuinely stunned. Then Kate laughed. See, you still treat me like a child, don't you? He bowed his head in mock defeat. All right, you figured it out. You're right. Her smile froze. Ryan sat up, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Actually, you've got it exactly backward. The sequences run from weakest to strongest. Sequence 9 is the weakest, and Sequence 1 is the most potent. He paused, letting his words settle before adding, and there's no hidden criminal reference at all. I simply numbered them that way, as a nod to, shall we say, dark wizards like Voldemort. Kate's cheeks flushed, but before she could snap back, Ryan fell silent, his triumphant smirk doing all the talking. Kate had always been like a nervous rabbit, cute, but liable to bite when she felt cornered. Yet 10 minutes of Ryan's tender words and the juicy tidbits he'd brought back from his time travels later, she'd completely composed herself. You'd never guess that this calm, cozy girl curled up in Ryan's arms was the same one who'd only moments before been shaking with anger, ready to sock him with a tiny fist. Even their teasing, "Come on, I want more," sounded to any unsuspecting eavesdropper like someone blissed out on pure Cloud9 romance. Ryan settled back on the soft, floating bed of cloud. Brushed a strand of hair from Kate's forehead and said, "All right, last story. Do you know how your father first met your mother?" Kate's eyes sparkled. Really? Is it different from what everyone says? She switched to the little Japanese she'd picked up before. Hogwarts no kurisumasu dina de chichi wa ha ni michibikareta te? Ryan chuckled. Yes, it was at the Hogwarts Christmas dinner, on your mother's birthday, actually. But though she did make the first move, it wasn't exactly to flirt. She was looking to criticize him. Kate couldn't contain herself. She practically bounced against the cloud mattress. Why? Tell me why. Ryan laughed softly and ruffled her hair. Because your mother, she spotted a flaw in his spell work and couldn't resist pointing it out. Kate gasped, then threw her arms around him, her excitement as boundless as the sky they floated in. Kate leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. So it really all comes down to birthday gifts? Ryan nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Yeah, between your mother and your father, it was your dad who got the idea first. Kate's eyes lit up, but he gave the wrong present. Before Ryan could elaborate, she was peppering him with questions. Whose gift was it supposed to be? What was in it? How furious did Mom get? Ryan chuckled softly. Well, that gift wasn't even meant for her. It was originally a gag Christmas present. A prank. Kate's eyebrows shot up. A prank? From him? Seriously? He planned it with someone who hates him almost as much as Snape hated James Potter, Ryan said, folding his arms. You can imagine the kind of joke they had in mind, and how enraged your mother was when she opened it. And, Kate paused, leaning in. It gets worse, doesn't it? Ryan's grin widened. Much worse. Your dad actually signed the tag with his own name. At the memory, Ryan couldn't help but laugh. He pictured Mrs. Carter's expression, mortified, fiery, utterly unamused. Kate watched him, amused herself now, but still hungry for the full story. Show me, she insisted. Ryan nodded and waved his hand. A swirl of mist and light gathered in midair, the sea of clouds. Within its depths, the scene unfolded. Christmas morning in the Carter household. Kate's mother, still in her robe, tore into the oddly shaped package. Her polite smile froze as she read the gift tag. Shock turned to horror, then to sheer outrage, as she realized exactly what she'd been given, and who had sent it. Standing beside the projection, Kate couldn't resist. She raised her compact camera and snapped a few quick shots, her lips curving into a mischievous smile. Ryan glanced over. You're taking pictures? Kate shrugged, tucking the camera away. For posterity. She winked. And maybe a little blackmail, just in case Dad ever forgets he owes us one. Ryan laughed, shaking his head. You're impossible. But as the misty replay continued, both of them knew one thing for sure. Neither of them would ever let their mother forget this holiday disaster, especially now that they had photographic proof. I'm moving out next year to deal with this, and my parents won't be able to stop me. Kate flashed a proud grin, holding up 2 photographs. One showed her mother's face grotesquely swollen, tangled hair framing a shadowed, sullen expression. The other captured her father, his features twisted by dark curses, with quivering tentacles and feather-like plumes sprouting from his skin. "You're really going to blackmail them with these?" Ryan asked, eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "I mean, those are your parents." "Exactly," Kate said, waving the photos like a banner. "If they don't cooperate, I'll plaster these images all over the village. So, are you okay with me moving in after graduation next year?" Ryan paused, stroking his chin as he weighed her threat. "It's not a problem for you, Kate. You're not Furong." Kate rolled her eyes. "That's precisely why it's fine." With a final nod, Ryan conceded. "All right, I can handle that." Kate leaned back, then asked, "By the way, what about those Death Eaters? Still alive? No lingering sickness?" Ryan let out a short laugh. "Don't worry, they're all still alive and kicking. As long as Voldemort, the so-called will of God, is still at large, and as long as none of us ever tries to down a drop of basilisk venom, there's no way we'll perish over something so absurd." Ryan's lips curved into a knowing smile. This summer at Smith Castle, cut off from the outside world, they'd abandoned their usual mind games, and even their beloved show, Harry Potter and the Otherworldly Journey, had been put on hold. Penelope didn't mind. She lost herself in books and hardly noticed. But Kate was going stir-crazy. Always a little whirlwind, she hated staying in one place, and without Ryan's magical glimpse into far-off happenings, she'd have demanded they leave the grounds in a heartbeat. The recent saga of the stranded Death Eaters on that deserted island had become Kate's latest obsession. Her eyes glittered with excitement at the thought. Spotting her eagerness, Ryan raised an eyebrow and asked, "Want to watch the replay?" Under his gentle, amused gaze, Kate nodded again and again, already eager for the next adventure. "Well, I was just about to head out," Kate said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Neville and I go way back. We share the same lineage," Neville added with a wry smile. Kate sighed. "I've been so focused on Harry lately that I've unintentionally been neglecting everyone else." Neville shook his head. "You're right. I can't afford to play favorites." With a casual flick of his wrist, he teleported them all into Ryan's enormous pink bed. "Anyone up for a quick cuddle before we go?" Neville teased, spreading out the covers. Kate yanked the quilt up to her chin and hid beneath it, cheeks warming. Ryan stood off to the side, shirt in hand, hesitating. Should he change now, or strip down first? The question hung in the air as his friends waited, bundled and expectant, on the soft, oversized bed. Chapter 61. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Ryan sat on the edge of the pale pink, princess-style bed, wiping sweat from his brow. With a quick flick of his wand, he summoned a simple black wizard's robe, which fell neatly over his shoulders. The torn garments strewn across the floor twinkled as they mended themselves, restoring to their original state in an instant. Underneath the quilt, Kate lay half asleep, dawdling as she slipped into her clothes. She peeked out at him and asked, "Ryan, where are we headed?" "To the Longbottom's house," he replied without looking up. Kate sat up, rubbing the last traces of sleep from her eyes. She wasn't a child anymore, definitely too old for lion puppet costumes, and today called for something more grown-up. Yet, there didn't seem to be much to choose from on the bed. That, however, wasn't a problem. Ryan had keyed in a pocket dimension known as the Four Seasons Flower Pavilion, a tidy little extra-dimensional wardrobe tucked away just beyond the bedroom wall. Pulling out half a dozen elegant gowns, or a dozen, if he felt indulgent, was as effortless as lifting a corner of space itself. Kate smiled. With a few more wand swishes, she'd be ready in no time. Neville's birthday had just passed, and I was determined to give him the perfect gift. It might be late, but I was certain it would outshine anything Harry could come up with. I lifted my chin and smoothed my robes. "St. Mungo's," I announced. Kate's brow furrowed. "You mean you're actually going there? To see Neville's parents? I thought you wanted Neville to do it himself." I shrugged, meeting her surprised look. "You always say a sword can cut through any barrier." I waved an imaginary blade in the air. "With the sword magic we've taught him, Neville could slice through the miasma that's trapped his parents' minds." Kate pulled her hand back under the quilt, still frowning. "But Neville's never even read a single fantasy novel. He'd never think to try something like that on his own." "That's exactly why we need to remind him," I said. "Magic follows your heart. If Neville never believes it's possible, he'll never learn to do it." Kate slipped into her emerald healer's robe and stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination. "Just so we're clear," she said, "I'm not sneaking in through that hidden passage in your house. We're going through the front entrance on the first floor." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You've never been to St. Mungo's before?" "Not properly," Kate admitted, fluffing the hem of her robe. "I'll follow your lead." He nodded, reached for her hand, and together they passed through the shimmering gray barrier that concealed the hospital's main entrance. The air on the other side hummed with the quiet energy of wards and waiting rooms, the scent of antiseptic mingling with subtle hints of healing potions. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Injuries and Sicknesses was founded in the early 17th century by the legendary healer Mungo Bonham. Nestled in central London, it catered not only to witches and wizards, but, on occasion, to muggles struck down by misfired spells. Inside, the staff, known simply as healers, wore green robes as a badge of their skill and dedication. To earn that uniform, a student must achieve at least an E on NAET-level exams in potions, transfiguration, herbology, charms, and defense against the dark arts. Kate smoothed her robe, recalling her own struggles with transfiguration. With a wry smile, she admitted to herself what she'd never be bold enough to say aloud: she'd never make it as a healer. But for today, she was content simply to be here, walking beside Ryan into the heart of wizarding medicine. During the Wizarding War, healers occupied an unusually secure position. Even the most zealous Death Eaters eventually needed medical attention, and the Ministry saw to it that any qualified healer, Muggle-born or otherwise, could carry a wand. That necessity pushed training standards ever higher. Today, anyone who aspires to heal at St. Mungo's must earn at least an E on their NEWTs in potions, transfiguration, herbology, charms, and defense against the dark arts. St. Mungo's Hospital itself is just as distinctive as its reputation. It's tucked away on a busy London street, its presence marked only by an old red-brick department store called Tao Tao Co. Limited. The store's shutters are never raised, and its sign, temporarily closed, suggests it has never served a single customer. In truth, only members of the Smith family may pass through its doors. A concealed corridor behind the shop leads directly to a private suite on St. Mungo's 6th floor, where approved patients and their families can check in without queuing or even making an appointment. Any other witch or wizard wishing to gain entry must submit their request via the mannequin perched in the display window. The Tao Tao Company's storefront looked no different from any other shop on the busy avenue: neatly lettered windows, an unremarkable door, and a life-size statue standing guard at the entrance. Yet this was the discreet front for a fully functioning magical hospital. Muggles seldom ventured here, not because of a powerful invisibility charm like the one shielding the leaky cauldron, but because anyone unprepared who stepped through those doors simply vanished. From the street, though, there was nothing to suggest a medical wing lay just beyond the glass. No bell tinkled, no attendant greeted you. All you needed was the right name or patient number whispered to the statue, and the door would yield. This morning, the crowd was heavier than usual. Kate and Ryan wove through the throng until they stopped in front of the statue. Kate glanced around, shading her eyes against the glare of the sun. "There are so many people," she said, voice tight. "Are we really in the right spot for a hospital?" She waved a hand in front of her face, trying to coax a breeze. Heat radiated off the pavement, and even the shade offered little relief. Before she could wilt completely, Kate slipped her arm through Ryan's. He gave her a reassuring smile. "It's here," he said softly. He always seemed perfectly comfortable, regardless of the season, thanks to a subtle enchantment that kept his body at an even temperature. In summer, he felt cool and refreshing. In winter, naturally warm. Today, the crisp chill against her side felt like a lifeline. Kate drew a deep breath, steadied herself, and leaned in closer. With Ryan by her side, she felt ready for whatever awaited them beyond that glass door. Whenever anyone stood close to Ryan, the natural musk of his perfect physique seemed to soothe and invigorate them. Kate, walking beside him through the busy London streets, couldn't help but exhale a soft, involuntary ah in public. Ryan glanced down at her with a fond smile. Finding a proper site for our hospital in London hasn't been easy. Too many muggles, hard to hide anything big enough for the magical community here. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. We looked at Diagon Alley, but there's just not enough space there, and going underground like the Ministry of Magic was out of the question, far too unsanitary for a medical wing. Kate nodded. So, where did we end up? Ryan moved closer and lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Right here, in plain sight. Think of it as guerrilla medicine. The crowds are our camouflage. She glanced around. Despite the bustle of people around them, something felt off. Most of the faces in the throng were draped in ordinary Muggle attire, yet she noticed those same eyes flicking toward her wizard's robes with thinly veiled disapproval. Wait, Kate stepped back, lightly pushing Ryan's shoulder. They can see us. Of course they can, Ryan said, feigning innocence with wide, blinking eyes. Don't you want to have a little fun? Kate felt her cheeks warm. Hey, don't give me that look. She ducked her head to hide her blush. It's embarrassing. I'm pretty sure they all heard me just now. Ryan reached out, brushing a stray lock of her hair behind her ear. Relax. As long as we can slip patients in and out among the crowd, we're golden. No ministry inspectors, no curious muggles, just healing, right under their noses. Kate took a deep breath and nodded, determination rekindling in her chest. All right, but next time, I swear I'm bringing a cloak. They slipped back into the flow of pedestrians, two wizards in plain sight, ready to open the doors of their new hospital to those in need. Kate felt her anger melt away the moment she met wide, earnest eyes. She couldn't help smiling. Maybe it really was a handsome guy perk, as his expression seemed to say. Shall we head inside? Ryan asked, nodding toward the old red brick building across the street. Sure, Kate answered softly. She slipped her hand into his, and without a backward glance, they hurried toward the entrance. In minutes, they reached Tao Tao & Co. Limited. The once proud department store now looked deserted and worn. Dusty display windows held only a few battered mannequins, their wigs askew, decked out in styles that must have been at least 10 years out of fashion. On the heavy double doors, a faded sign read, "Closed for renovation." A couple of pedestrians passing by whispered to each other, "This place never actually reopens." Is this really it? Kate asked, doubt creeping into her voice. Ryan shrugged. What else could it be? Taking a steadying breath, Kate pushed open the creaking door. Shafts of afternoon light revealed a dim, empty interior. Ryan paused inside, turned to her with a calm half-smile, and blinked once. I'm here to see Frank Longbottom, he said as though announcing the most ordinary appointment in the world. Chapter 505, Dumbledore and Grindelwald Hate the Cold. I think this green one should do, Kate murmured, stepping up to the display window. Inside stood a single female mannequin, hardly a flattering sight, with drooping false eyelashes and a stiff nylon skirt in a flat, institutional green. Therapists all wear green, she reminded herself, squinting through the streetlight's glare. Outside, pedestrians flowed past and cars honked in a ceaseless roar. How could the dummy even hear her? Still, she pressed her palm to the chilled glass until it fogged. Hello, I'm here to see Frank Longbottom. A chuckle drifted from her side. Ryan leaned in, amusement dancing in his eyes. You're really talking to a mannequin, Kate? She bristled, then caught her breath as the figure before her creaked to life. The mannequin's head tilted, its stiff eyes locking onto Kate's. One jointed finger lifted in a rigid salute. You may enter, it intoned with a hollow echo. Kate's heart hammered. Ryan reached out, took her hand, and gave it a reassuring squeeze. Together they stepped forward, and the pane of glass turned to mist beneath their feet. In an instant they passed through, leaving the city's din behind. A hushed stillness surrounded them on the other side. Kate brushed at her cheek, where the window's edge had grazed her skin. Whatever lay ahead in that silent corridor, she knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Just as Kate's fingers brushed the glass, she caught a movement out of the corner of her eye and spun around. The busy crowd hadn't spared a glance for the gaudy Tao Tao Company display window, nor had anyone noticed Ryan fade into thin air mere paces away. In theory, Kate should have been unbothered. Both she and Ryan possessed concealment magic, yet something felt different this time. Normally, Ryan's talent was a passive charm. Her own gift required an active incantation. Tonight, he'd simply vanished before everyone's eyes without casting a single spell to hide, and then made no effort to mask his presence afterward. The sheer boldness of it sent a tingle of curiosity through her. After all, they had agreed to pose as an ordinary wizarding couple for the evening. Could this inexplicable display mean she was somehow more special than Penelope, Fleur, Luna, or even Hermione? A sweet, triumphant smile curved her lips. One thing was certain. Ryan must have woven an unusual glamour to mute his natural magnetism. In his unshielded state, he could rival any male Vila, drawing admirers like moths to a flame. Left untempered, his very existence would ignite adoration and probably chaos among bystanders. The thought flickered and vanished almost as quickly as he had. Shaking off her reverie, Kate refocused on the moment. Whatever enchantment Ryan had employed, it was their secret, and for now, that was more than enough. She barely registered the chill of the corridor's marble floor give way to something warm and dry under her feet, as though she'd just swum through a frigid stream and surfaced into a toasty bath. Ryan was just ahead of her on the right, and before them lay a crowded waiting room. Rows of rickety wooden chairs creaked beneath an assortment of witches and wizards. A few looked entirely ordinary, absorbed in the latest issue of the Quibbler. Others, however, bore grotesque, magical afflictions, two-headed men, sorceresses whose chests were studded with curious growths, even a tentacled fellow who reminded her fleetingly of the rumored denizens of Atlantis who'd graft tentacles onto themselves for spectacle. Inside it was marginally quieter than the bustling hallway, but not silent. Strange, intermittent sounds drifted through the air. In the front row sat a pale witch whose hands fluttered mid-air like a pianist at the keys. Every time her fingers paused, she emitted a clanging series of notes, sharp, metallic piano tones that rang out unnervingly. Then she'd lift her chin, and an echoing organ drone would rumble from her throat. In a shadowy corner, a thin wizard shifted in his seat. Immediately, the scent of honey and wildflowers filled the room, as if a swarm of bees were buzzing around him. His left eye began to rotate in its socket, slowly turning like a weathered clock's pendulum. Hermione glanced at Ryan, whose eyebrows were already raised. She forced herself to take a deep breath. This was the Obscurus Clinic, after all, where the weird, the cursed, and the magically malnourished waited for care. She squared her shoulders. At least they knew what they were in for. He forced himself to stay perfectly still and close his eyes. All around him, wizards in vibrant green robes wove through the waiting crowd, pausing now and then to question people and jot notes on their parchment-clad writing boards. "Are we really going to queue?" Kate's voice rang with delight as she turned to Ryan. Queuing, an oddly quaint notion the two of them hadn't indulged in for years. Thanks to Ryan's talent for masking her presence, they typically slipped straight to the front of any line, vanished, then reappeared as if they'd never left. No waiting required. "Yeah," Ryan said with a fond smile, ruffling Kate's hair. "Let's do it the old-fashioned way." He took her hand and led her into the winding line. Around them, the soft hum of whispered spells and murmured conversations filled the air. A little further back, Caitlin poked her head around a cluster of cloaks, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. Up ahead sat a plump, blonde witch behind a table labeled Information Desk. The wall behind her was plastered with warnings and advisories. Always clean your crucible to prevent toxic residue. Do not dispense antidotes without a certified therapist's approval, and other stern reminders. Dominating the space was a single, richly framed portrait, a severe face set against a deep crimson background. Beneath it, in elegant script, read, "Delice Devant, St. Marlborough's College." As Kate settled into line, she leaned toward Ryan and whispered, "This feels normal." Ryan chuckled softly. Sometimes a little normal is exactly what we need, and for the first moment in a long while, Kate believed him. Albus Dumbledore Mungo's healer, 17-2741, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, 1741 to 1768. Kate rolled her wide, curious eyes and curled her lips into a wry smile. "Looks like we're out of luck. Professor Dellis isn't here." Ryan shrugged. "She's probably holed up in the headmaster's office. At least she'd have plenty of familiar portraits to keep her company." A mischievous gleam danced in Kate's eyes. "Or," she whispered, leaning closer, "we could sneak a listen on Dumbledore and Grindelwald. They're both at Hogwarts right now. Maybe they're rekindling that old romance." Ryan's face went pale. "Don't even joke about that," he hissed. glancing over his shoulder as if the walls themselves might hear. Ever since his time travel ordeal, he'd sworn off teasing her about the legendary friendship, some said more, between the two wizards. Yet every time he tried to poke fun, Kate's eyes would light up like the finest 24-karat gold, and he'd remember how fiercely devoted she'd always been to Dumbledore. Over the years, even Gandalf's mind games hadn't entirely dimmed her admiration. Though Kate no longer worshipped the man she once called the greatest wizard of all time, the mere suggestion of a Dumbledore-Grindelwald affair still stirred her inner paparazzo. Ryan sighed and shook his head. "Fine," he muttered. "I forgot you never really outgrow a good scandal." Kate beamed. "Trust me, this is just the beginning." To be continued. Rita Skeeter 2 has returned. Kate leaned over to Ryan as they edged forward in the long procession of witches and wizards. "Why dawdle in line? Let's apparate straight to Hogwarts." Ryan raised an amused eyebrow. "And risk landing on the lawn instead of the courtyard? A simple summoning charm should do the trick." Kate laughed, rubbing her hands together. "Or maybe we should just trust a little magic and a little love to guide us." Thousands of miles away, in two very different places, the world seemed to shiver. In a battered tent on the fringes of Europe, Gellert Grindelwald froze mid-spell. His loyal followers knelt at once. "Master, shall we proceed?" Grindelwald blinked, wand still raised. "No, nothing." He snapped his fingers, and the wand clattered back into its holster. Confusion darkened his eyes. At the same moment, in the ornate headmaster's office atop Hogwarts' highest tower, Albus Dumbledore felt the same sudden chill. The enchanted portraits lining the walls leaned forward, voices clamoring in unison. "Professor, what is it?" Dumbledore raised a hand for silence. I just felt a disturbance, a cold wave of dread." One old portrait huffed. "Could Aberforth be at the heart of this?" The headmaster sighed. "Yes, I have every reason to believe Aberforth will oppose us, and perhaps strike as if we were enemies." A younger portrait piped up. "But why bring us into this?" Dumbledore rubbed his eyes. "Best to let it rest for now." Back at St. Mungo's, Kate and Ryan huddled in the dimly lit corridors of the healer's wing. She whispered, "You heard the headmaster. Aberforth's loyalty lies elsewhere, maybe with goats, but certainly not his brother." Ryan cracked a rueful smile. "If he's planning to fight Dumbledore and Grindelwald to the death, they'll both be too distracted for us to be noticed." Kate's eyes glittered. "Then it's settled. We slip into Hogwarts under the cover of their quarrel and find exactly what we've come for." "Okay," Anna said, settling back in her chair. "Do all the Dumbledores have some odd little habit?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. Anna grinned. "Well, Aberforth adores his goats, of course, and Albus has always had a soft spot for wizards, and there's supposed to be another one, someone who's obsessed with Hawkclup." Ryan shook his head. "No, you've got it wrong. The fellow who's besotted with Hawkclup isn't a Dumbledore at all. He's actually engaged to our headmistress's aunt." Chapter 63, St. Mungo's, the Smith Estate, 4 p.m., first-floor waiting room, St. Mungo's Hospital. The quiet hum of St. Mungo's first-floor waiting room settled over Kate like a soft blanket until Ryan stiffened beside her. He stood inches from a featureless wall, but his normally silver-white eyes had shifted, narrowing into something feral. "Ryan, what are you seeing?" Kate asked, holding out her right hand. She traced the grooves of her personal rune in hopes of slipping into his vision. A quick jolt, like the snap of a stun bolt, raced up her arm. "Ow," she muttered, lips pursed. Her connection had been blocked. Undeterred, Kate followed Ryan's gaze. She whispered a low spell, mapping the subtle currents of magic around them. The ley lines beneath St. Mungo's were old, but she recognized something much older and far grander. "Aha, Hogwarts!" she crowed, tapping Ryan on the shoulder. True, her transfiguration left a lot to be desired, but her years of puzzle-style spellwork had given her an edge in tracking magical fields. Ryan's tense posture softened. He turned to her with a slow, approving nod. Kate grinned. She'd pinpointed the ancient, unmistakable aura of Hogwarts drifting through the ward's walls, and Ryan agreed she'd hit the mark. Ryan leaned in, speaking in a low voice. "It was Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Their magical intuition is extremely powerful." Kate let out an exasperated sigh. "You mean they actually read my thoughts just now?" Ryan glanced down the long queue snaking ahead of them. "That's not all. They were so unnerved they drew their wands." "Oh, I see," Kate muttered. No wonder they were tense. When you're as famous as they are, there are bound to be wizards with ill intentions. Ryan tilted his head. So, are you admitting you had bad intentions? Kate shrugged. And if I did? A faint smile touched Ryan's lips. Have you ever heard the saying, a cicada awakens before the autumn wind stirs? Kate rolled her eyes. Just explain it, he nodded. It means that even before the cool breeze arrives, the cicada senses it in the air. Your negative thoughts were like that autumn wind, inescapable. Dumbledore and Grindelwald in this metaphor are the cicadas. They sense danger long before it's present. Kate raised an eyebrow. You're saying my thoughts threatened them? Exactly, Ryan said quietly. Other wizards' malicious thoughts are like dust motes, easy to ignore. Yours, however, were the autumn wind itself, impossible for them to ignore. At that moment, he noticed the clerk was almost ready for him. Ryan straightened, tucking the conversation away as he stepped forward to the counter. On the 5th floor of the Curse Injury Department, a sluggish line of patients stretched past the reception desk. At the front, a middle-aged wizard paced anxiously, one hand pinching his nose. Curious, Kate slipped out of line and peered over his shoulder. Sure enough, a walnut was lodged up his nostril. Family feud, I presume? The blonde witch behind the desk drawled, half smiling. You're the third person I've seen today with something stuck in a nasal cavity. Curse injury, 5th floor, turn left at the elevator. Kate ducked back behind Ryan and shuffled a few paces forward. The next in line was an elderly witch whose hair was bristling with dozens of ornate pins. She inched up to the desk at a pace so slow it tested everyone's patience. I've come to see Shirley Montgomery, she said in a voice barely above a whisper. The desk clerk forced a polite smile. Ward 33, she replied before adding in a more candid tone. Though I wouldn't get your hopes up, she's completely disoriented and convinced she's a rabbit. She waved the witch on. Next. Before the elderly witch could protest, a young wizard bounded up. With a mechanical duang-duang, he seemed to hop on spring-loaded legs, bouncing so high his head scraped the ceiling tiles. I was cursed by a newly invented spell, he panted, each word punctuated by a hump and a spring. I tried a reduction charm. Didn't work. So the clerk held up her hand. Your paperwork is perfectly clear, black and white. She tapped the stack of forms. Please take a seat. We'll call you when an examiner is ready. The wizard gave one final spring and, cheeks flaming, joined the others in the crowded waiting area. Kate settled back behind Ryan, already dreading the next odd case to appear at the desk. Can you read this? The impatient blonde witch snapped, jabbing a finger at the large directory mounted beside the intake desk. It clearly says you need to go to the Curse and Injury Department on the 5th floor. Next. Ryan exchanged a relieved glance with Kate. Finally, at least we know where we're headed. Kate leaned forward, scanning the neatly organized list. 1st floor, artifact accidents, crucible explosions, wand misfires, broom collisions, and so on. 2nd floor, biological injuries, stings, burns, puncture wounds, etc. 3rd floor, infectious magical diseases, dragon pox, vanishing syndrome, lymphatic mycositis, and more. 4th floor, toxicology and potion side effects, rashes, nausea, uncontrollable laughter, etc. 5th floor, curses and misdirected spells, irremovable curses, backfired charms, wrong incantations, and the like. 6th floor, tea room and gift shop. Beneath the list, a cheerful note read, if you're unsure where to go, having trouble speaking, or simply can't remember why you're here, our receptionists are here to help. Ryan gave Kate a nod. 5th floor, curse and injury. Let's hope it's quick. If that blonde over there is any indication, they're not exactly known for their patience. Together they set off toward the stairwell, steeling themselves for whatever twisted curse awaited them above. The blonde witch looked up as we approached, her annoyance shifting into a deceptively sweet tone. Back again, are we? Sweetheart, anything I can help you with today? She brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear and intentionally eased the collar of her robe, dangling the invitation for our attention. Just as she opened her mouth, no doubt to recite the ward rules posted on the sign behind her, Ryan spoke. We're here to see Frank Longbottom and Alice Longbottom. Her flirtatious smile vanished in an instant. She snapped to attention, straightened her robe, and tugged the collar up around her neck. After a moment's hesitation, she cleared her throat and adopted a brisk professional tone. Do you have an appointment? We keep a strict log of every visitor for Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom, and I don't have either of your names on file. I'm Lane Smith, the taller man said, stepping forward. Lane Smith. The witch's brow furrowed as she searched her memory. Then her eyes brightened. Weren't you? No, wait. She trailed off, clearly struggling to place us. Which floor are you from? Ryan produced a small slip of silvery white parchment from inside his coat. The paper bore the design of an eye, its pupil alive with shifting runes. You mean this? She leaned in, scanning the rune-etched eye. 5th floor, door 5 on the right, she murmured. They're behind the locked door at the end of the hall. Ryan folded the parchment and slipped it back into his pocket. Thank you, he said with a nod. We appreciate your help. The witch straightened once more, her professional mask firmly back in place. Just keep the noise down. The patients need their rest. And with that, she stepped aside, allowing us to pass. The witch placed a small brass key in Ryan's palm, bowing politely. Here it is. Ryan pocketed the key and pulled Kate through the sturdy double doors beside him. Kate's eyes lit up. You saw how she behaved earlier, so dismissive, then the moment you flashed your credentials, everything changed. This really is St. Mungo's, isn't it? They walked down a silent, torchlit corridor. Ryan shook his head. St. Mungo's isn't just a person's name, it's the entire hospital. Mungo Bonham and Vandon Smith founded it centuries ago. And trust me, the matron's respect wasn't because of who I am. She's bound by professional ethics and already knew precisely why the Longbottoms are here. If this were Cornelius Fudge, I wouldn't even need an introduction. A quick face scan would do the trick. Up ahead, an ancient wooden staircase groaned underfoot. Watch your step, Ryan warned, a teasing smile tugging at his lips. We're about to enter what they call hell. Kate frowned. Hell. But before she could ask more, Ryan took her hand and led her down the stairs. At the bottom, Kate understood the warning. The walls were lined with grotesque portraits, warped, nightmarish faces of the hospital's resident therapists, their hollow eyes tracking every visitor. As Kate climbed the staircase, the therapists peppered her with shouted diagnoses, each more bizarre than the last, claiming her only lasting side effect would be stunted growth, and proceeded to prescribe an array of dreadful treatments. Unsurprisingly, Kate was livid.